leaders
Yep,
of tomorrow.
Of tomorrow.
But
they don't just say future and leave it there. They have to remind
no.
you future, in case you forgot,
Yes.
is not today.
No, it's tomorrow. And when tomorrow comes, you are told tomorrow. The thing is, I think there's this lack of understanding as to what leadership actually holistically entails. Huh? If you are informed by a politician or a senior government official that you will be a leader in the future of tomorrow, then you assume that the leadership pertains to what that particular individual does.
Yeah.
However, that really is just one aspect of leadership.
There are many others, right?
Many, 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 many others.
Oh, you'll educate us today. We'll get to know what exactly you mean. Let's start the show where we always begin. Fellow Kenyans.
So, Kenya, 189 cases out of 1,305 tested yesterday. Saw the highest number of deaths in the country at 12. What is it?
Because the previous day there was 7,000 something samples. Then we've dropped to 1,000.
Yes. And so if we're looking at that number, it is just under, actually just over 10%, almost 15% of, actually more than 15% of the numbers tested resulted in positive tests. And it's being called Kenya's deadliest day. The highest number of deaths recorded in Kenya since this all began, 12 dead. And now this raises Kenya's numbers to 10,294.
That is a high number of people dying on the same day, especially when
dying?
You get to understand of COVID-19. People who were reported dead of COVID-19, 12 in a day, especially when you hear that many of them died at home.
Yeah.
It tells you something about this virus, how a number of things that are happening here, and the questions that emerge. Is it that it's taking you down so fast from the moment your symptoms start showing to when they develop and you become critically ill to the moment when you actually now die? And also the issue of what is it saying about our healthcare system?
This is it. Or, I mean, if you're looking at the behaviors of people, are we seeing, I mean, we don't know, but are we seeing that people might have a symptom and they're assuming that it's, something that they would be able to handle, and then they're getting into hospital, or when it's a bit too late, or when the symptoms have, gotten to the point whereby they're unable to handle it? Because if we have certain numbers of people dying at home, it means that, because it would be difficult to say that somebody started feeling ill from symptoms of COVID in the morning and by evening they were gone. But we don't know. It could be the case. We just don't know.
Yeah. New projections from scientists in Kenya, which are indicating, well, according to their projections, that we may have 1.4 million people being affected by the coronavirus in Nairobi alone. Projections also saying that 102,000 people will be symptomatic, with 8,755 of them needing hospitalization over the next 1 year. And over 1,500 individuals to be admitted to ICU. 928 people may die during the disease's life cycle. More than 100,000 will be symptomatic. And this just projections on what they're looking at. And projections, remember, worst case scenario, what is being looked at. So,
It is worst case scenario. Now, if we look at the numbers that have been recorded around the world, 13,236,249 with 575,000 deaths. This is what we see around the world. The cases in the United States, I don't want to call them unprecedented, because, I mean, it would only be results of indicators that were put out before. Right. The cases continue to rise, with Florida, 15,000 cases, what we saw, and above that now, coming out of one state. In the United States, 3,479,483. Brazil at 1.887,959 million. We know that their president, Mr. Bolsonaro, was, or rather is still being treated for COVID. India, almost 1 million cases now at 907,645. And Russia, having also recorded their highest number of cases the last couple of days and has now shot them up to 733,699 cases. Now, the third, so then again, looking at Mexico, high numbers in the last 7 hours, 4,685, with 485 of those, just over 10%, resulting in death on the same day. So yes, the numbers continue to rise. Still more countries putting in those measures, reintroducing those measures that they had pulled back on just a couple of weeks ago, a couple of days ago, and saying actually we're not going to be able to deal with this. Donald Trump out in public wearing a mask over the last 2 days caused quite a stir in the news world. He had previously said there was no need for this. He's been tested, waiting for his results to see if he actually will be positive. So this is what we see around the world. Again, South Africa having also reinstituted their lockdown with 1,000 deaths actually then been confirmed. 1,000 deaths, COVID deaths in the last
1,000 COVID-related deaths.
Over
within a week.
over a 5-day period. So this is what we see.
So back into lockdown and back into restriction on the sale of alcohol. Many other countries also coming back into restriction on reopening of very many places like restaurants and such, and public places.
What comes to my mind is perhaps a discussion on two ethical and moral issues. One, should the government bow to pressure that is brought to bear on it by individuals seeking to simply go back to a way of life they were accustomed to? Or should the government strictly adhere to what the medical experts advise? I'm putting it really simply because there's a social aspect of the disease, but it is the disease. In the absence of the disease, the social issues that we're talking about, that lockdown and so forth, would not need to occur.
Yeah.
So, what should weigh heavier? And what particular position should the government actually take?
This is what Uhuru was calling a battle between two rights.
Yes.
Because yes, whereas we're talking about the disease, it's a disease that's causing all these things. It's a disease that's making the government come up with those measures in the first place. We also have now the social side of things, because you restrict movement, you put in all those restrictive measures, and then you see the positives that's coming out of it. While at the same time, you're educating the population and telling them this is what we need to do together. So you sort of have to see and strike that balance between, okay, so you guys understand what we are going through, you understand what we need to do, but at the same time, we all understand that we need to come out, we need to continue our lives.
To live, absolutely. I mean, it's difficult. What are you going to do in this case? I mean, and we've seen the complaints over the last,
And we hadn't
4
prepared
weeks.
ourselves, like, polar bears, that winter is coming, so we eat, and then we hibernate.
We stuff ourselves silly.
Yeah. So we are not at that point. How long can we lock ourselves
Eric,
down?
what is tragic and what may sound a little dreary is we are, in terms of government preparedness, we are never prepared.
Yeah.
What we are prepared to do is talk the living daylights out of it, but we are really, in all honesty, never prepared.
Never.
Even when an opportunity presents itself where we can take advantage of the situation and prepare, somehow those in authority and who are entrusted with ensuring these things are done will bungle it somewhere along the line. Because human lives do not seem to take center stage for many of the people who are charged with authority over such matters. Not really.
No.
Commerce trumps. Yes.
But commerce is also human livelihoods.
Unfortunately, it doesn't cater for the large majority of the people. It is a self-centered interest that focuses on a few individuals at the detriment, at the dire
people.
detriment of a very large population. Or should I just say it bluntly, the majority.
The majority of people.
Yes.
But the majority of people are the ones that now need this commercial activity.
The commercial activity is part of the government functions and duties. Buying, that's a commercial activity. Now, the additional commercial activity where it has been bought and somebody decides to plug himself into this system.
To take advantage.
Yes, that's where the problem comes
of the
in.
gravy train.
Yes.
So spending must happen so that
Spending must happen because it is for such reasons that we pay taxes so that the government can have money to spend when an occasion like this arises. Yes. Now, where an issue arises between the taxpayer and the government is they ask, but I pay taxes so that certain things may be done on my behalf. Now, if I pay taxes faithfully and these things are not done, then the question of why I should pay taxes
arises.
It rises very, very strongly. Yes.
You keep asking yourself, so what was the point?
What really was the point? Yes.
Let's get into a break and come out of this break and start looking at the newspaper headlines. There's a lot to be covered this morning. At 14 minutes after 6, we'd like you to read the Standard newspaper with us from your mobile device. If you've got at least 20 shillings airtime on your phone, just dial star 550 star 2 hash. That's star 550 star 2 hash. And you'll just be able to download the Standard newspaper. You don't need to download any app. There's no sign-up form. There's no data charge required. Or in other words, there's no data bundles required. You just 20 bob worth of airtime and you'll be able to read the Standard newspaper. Do that and then come back to us. We'll give you a chance to win 1,000 shillings worth of free Safaricom airtime just because you've read that paper and you've been able to answer a question that I'll be asking you shortly. It's the Situation Room, Kenya's biggest conversation. Let's take a look at the weather shortly and then start chambuaring the newspapers. Good morning.
.24/7 around the world, non-stop. This is Spice FM.
This Tuesday morning, let's take a look at what the heavens have in store for today. Mostly cloudy conditions in Nairobi at 14 degrees. We'll see a high of 22 and lows of 12. And in Nyeri today at 13 degrees, it's cloudy conditions. And that will change into rainy conditions soon enough. Highs of 21 and lows of 13. Taking a look then into Nakuru, where it's mostly cloudy at 14 degrees. Thunderstorms are forecasted for the afternoon with highs of 21 and lows of 12. It's mostly cloudy in Eldoret at 12 12 degrees, highs of 18 and lows of 11, with thunderstorms also forecasted for the afternoon. Kisumu at 19 degrees will be mostly cloudy for most parts of the morning. Highs of 26 with rain expected later. Kakamega will also have wet conditions this afternoon with highs of 23 and lows of 14. It's raining in Mombasa at 24 degrees. It'll continue for most parts of the day with highs of 29 and lows of 24. Malindi, clear skies this morning with a few clouds. Check it here and there. Highs of 28 and lows of 24. Taking a look out then into Kampala at 18 degrees. It's mostly cloudy. Thunderstorms expected for later with highs of 24 and lows of 18. We'll take a look into Dar es Salaam where it's clear skies all through. The sun is up even now. Highs of 29 and lows of 22. It'll change later, though, going into an afternoon of rain showers. It's 5 degrees in Johannesburg and clear skies all through. Sunny conditions will prevail with highs of 11 and going down to a freezing low of -2. In Lagos, clear skies at 24 degrees. We'll see highs of 28 and lows of 23. We'll take a look then into Europe, where in London it's cloudy at 16 degrees, highs of 21 and lows of 13. And in Paris, clear skies this morning at 18 degrees, going into cloudy conditions later with highs of 23 and lows of 16. And finally, for now, in New York, where it's still Monday night, 27 degrees, clear skies when the sun does come up, highs of 31 and lows of 21.
Minutes after 6, it's a Situation Room, Kenya's biggest conversation. Let's hear today's proverb from C.T. Muga.
This saying for today comes from Egypt.
Mm-hmm.
Do a good deed and throw it into the sea.
Good Lord.
No, it isn't as...
Coming from Egyptians,
yeah.
it doesn't sound...
It's not as abstract as it sounds.
Actually, it isn't.
Think about it.
Tenda wema.
Bas. See?
Nenda zako.
Do it and forget about it.
Yes. In
Don't
short,
count it.
do not. Yes.
Yeah.
Sit expecting. Yes.
Tenda wema nenda
That's a
zako.
nice way to start.
Do a good deed.
And please carry on.
Throw it.
Yes, do unto others without expecting that others will do unto you.
Okay. Now, for your chance to win 1,000 shillings worth of free Safaricom airtime, we want you to read the Standard newspaper. Dial *550*2# on your mobile device, and with at least 20 shillings, you'll be able to access the Standard newspaper. Go to page 18. On page 18, there's a photo there, and there's three gentlemen and a lady. They're holding dummy checks. We'd like you to read the caption of that and then tell us the story. What's happening in that photo? 3 gentlemen and a lady, they're holding dummy checks. A nice photograph there. What's happening in that photo? Who are those people? What's the check? What's happening? What is it all about? On page 18 of the Standard this morning. Once you do that, call 0719-012-600 and you stand a chance to win 1,000 shillings worth of airtime if you tell the story as accurately as possible. All right, page 18, photo there. 3 gentlemen and a lady. They are holding dummy checks. What's happening? Okay. Let's take a look at the newspaper headlines. New call.
Okay, so Raila Odinga is back in the country, and his wife seems to be quite happy that he is after his surgery in Dubai. Wife of ODM leader yesterday spoke about the joy of watching him stroll in their garden a day after his return from Dubai, where he underwent a surgery 3 weeks ago.
Okay.
So, I mean, that's it.
Wish him a quick recovery.
Yeah, done. Moving on.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot going on about schools. How to fix the school crisis is what is on the front page of the Standard. And there seem to be options that are being given, and we'll tell you in a little bit who those options are coming from. Options to salvage the academic year. Recall Form 4 and Standard 8 candidates in September to prepare and sit national exams while observing safety measures and draw lessons for other classes. Number 2, use capitation funds to equip children with laptops and tablets to facilitate virtual learning and use the digital content from the curriculum where appropriate. Number 3, allow learners to transition to the next class based on past exam marks and arrange to cover lost time during the subsequent years to unclog the system. Number 4, change the academic calendar to run from September to July to cut time lost during transition from secondary school to college. And number 5, teachers to assemble small classes around them under the Nyumba Kumi initiative to complete the syllabus. And according to experts, the state took the lazy option in the schools crisis. Education experts have criticized the government for failing to explore options that would have ensured learners progress to the next class instead of holding them back for a year. This is after the Education CS last week said all schools remain closed until next January. The thought of Standard 8 and Form 4 candidates not sitting in the national exam has deflated 1.8 million students who expected to write the tests.
The Standard 8 test.
And Form 4.
Hey.
That particular analysis, I agree with 100%.
Yeah?
That?
And it was a cop-out. It can't be that what was declared by the CS for education is the best option that the country has. I don't believe that for a single second. This thing was not thrashed out adequately. No. We know
So
the
do you
numbers.
agree with the proposals that are being put out here by these experts? And the Standard basically has published a lot of opinions this morning from various experts.
Yeah.
There's one by Dean of School of Education at the Mount Kenya University, Benson Njoroge, who says, take calculated risk and let candidates back into class. That's starting with that. He says, let Standard 8s and Form 4s go back into class in September and then let them sit their exam.
That I agree with him.
So you're using them as guinea pigs?
No, they're not guinea
Because you're
pigs.
saying, basically, let them go back to class.
If you can
and-
open up eateries and you can determine that what you need to keep this place safe is A, B, C, D, the Form 4s and the Standard 8s will have the entire school at their disposal. So you cannot say that they do not have space in which to learn and they do not have space in which to keep that particular social distance that is required. One, where the problem may arise is the other safety measures like ensuring you have running water, you soap, but those are things that can be catered for and can be managed.
There's another one, a very critical one. Transport to and from school.
Now, that becomes a big issue when you are talking about schools that were previously what you call boarding schools. Okay? But again, a boarding school
In
doesn't
fact, boarding
consist...
schools, not so much.
Yes. There are three categories. There's boarding schools. There are rural schools where children walk to school or run to school.
Yeah.
Okay? Then there are urban schools where people use public transport to go to school. Okay? So, which one are we referring to?
All.
Yes. Now,
All of them
in
are
each of
students.
these cases...
Can we take a pause first and
Yes.
hear from Ochola in Mombasa? Because I think Ochola wants to try and answer our question this morning. Ochola, good morning.
Good morning, sir.
How are you?
I'm good, thank you.
Welcome to the situation. Have you read the Standard newspaper?
Yes, I've gone through it.
And you've gone to the page that I asked you to go to.
Yeah, page 18.
On page 18, there's a photo there, and there are three gentlemen and a lady, and they're holding dummy checks. What's happening on that photo, Ochola?
The Airtel, I think it is the Airtel officials, they are donating some money, about 25.5 million to fight the disease.
Who are they donating it to?
Oh. Okay, fine. Okay, I've not gone that far. I've just read you've asked us to read the...
Yep, read the caption and tell the
caption.
story as accurately as you can. That is where the challenge is, Ochola. So basically, look at the photo, see the people who are there, just tell us these are the people and this is the story, this is what's happening. So you've told us it's the Airtel people who are donating some money, and you need to tell us who are they donating the money to.
Okay, so okay, let me go to second and tell you.
Try that, Ochola. Thank you very much, and you can call back 0719-012-600, page 18 of the Standard this morning. There's a photo there. There are three gentlemen and a lady, and they're holding dummy checks. Look at that, read the caption, understand the story, and tell us the story as accurately as you can. What's happening in this photo? Shall we come back to the Standard 8s and Form 4, the candidates? So we were talking about, there are those three categories. There are boarding schools. So where you're talking about
You go to school,
transporting
you stay
the
there.
children from home to wherever they learn across the country to boarding. There's that period. Then they get to school, they stay there. because they have access to the entire school, then there's a possibility of physical distancing, and then of course you're going to have all those other logistical challenges. If you had a classroom of 40 that was being taught by one teacher, now you're dividing them into 4 classes. That means you need 4 teachers.
Most schools will have 4 teachers.
Those are other logistics.
Yes.
So that's one class. Then there's the other group of students that we're talking about, and these are the ones that rural-based day schools. Walk from home to school and back on a daily basis. And then there are urban-based day schools.
Yes.
Use public transport or use parents' vehicles to go to school and back.
Yes.
Uh-huh.
Eric, you see, you asked if we're using them as guinea pigs. The entire process of lockdown, lock up, lock across is an experiment.
True.
Okay? And we've seen how this experiment has worked in Kenya. If you're talking about public transport, we've seen how it has worked. If you're going to talk about the nitty-gritties of this, many schools that have boarding facilities or non-boarding facilities also have vehicles. There's a point I'm getting at here. If you utilize the resources that the education sector actually has in this country, all right, and you think it through well, believe me, all the dangers that we are talking about cannot be just averted, but they can be reduced to a bare minimum. That's what I'm trying to say. But one has to consider and talk about it seriously and say, okay, what are these resources that we have? Say, for instance, region by region, sub-county by sub-county. What do we have? What are these numbers? How do we ensure that these students are safe? That discussion, if it's had, believe me, and the resources that schools have, you'll find that this impossibility that we're dealing with is not such a great impossibility.
It's not a big one.
No, it's not as big as it's being made to sound. It's being made to sound difficult if someone is unwilling to look at some of the details that pertain to this particular issue.
Open to debate. Ochola is back. Ochola, have you now read the paper?
Yes, I've read it, sir.
You're lucky. Actually, just called back just when we were about to pick somebody else. Okay, so tell us the story. What's happening?
Oh, the Airtel directors, they are donating 35.5 million to the COVID-19 board to help fight the disease.
Okay. So this is the COVID-19 fund board.
Yes.
And they're receiving 25.5 million from Airtel directors.
Yes.
Well, yes, you got that. That is exactly what's happening.
Thank you.
This is exactly what's happening. So it's Airtel Kenya Managing Director Panta Desarma and Airtel Africa Vice President Corporate Communications Michael Okwiri, who are presenting a check of 25.5 million shillings to the COVID-19 board chairperson Jane Karuku and the board fundraising chairperson Jeremy Awori. The funds were donated to the board by the Airtel Kenya Africa together with their employees, and this brings the total amount contributed by the two offices to Kenya's battle against COVID-19 to 68 million shillings. This has gone to this COVID-19 fund. Do you know what happens when the money goes to this fund?
What happens?
Yeah, how does the fund now utilize the money?
Okay, it's now they identify maybe one of the maybe counties that are in their need of this money, or they can even purchase some equipment at least to help in fighting the disease.
Have you ever read a story somewhere where the COVID-19 fund has donated some of this money?
Ochola, you realize that you don't have to answer these questions. Eric is posing.
This doesn't. You're already winning. You've already won this money. Ochola, congratulations. Speak to our producer, John.
Thank you, Ndul, for saving me.
Anytime.
Congratulations.
Eric want to take me away again.
I'm telling you, you're already sweating.
Thank you.
Congratulations, Ochola. Have a good one in Mombasa. Speak to our producer, John. He'll get your details.
Oh, fine. Thank you.
All right. 6:30, it's a Situation Room, Kenya's biggest conversation. Let's take a look at traffic shortly and come back to looking at the newspaper headlines and what's been covered today. Good morning.
there's some action on the roads this morning already. 2 accidents have been recorded, unfortunately. Outer Ring, let's start there. Roundabouts, the jam is already building up. There was an accident at Kahawa Sukari just past Kenyatta University. A pickup, a lorry, and a canter. My goodness, it sounds like a story already, isn't it? But you're advised to use the service lane right now, and this is outbound on Thika Road. All right, a very bad accident involving a saloon car and a truck in Athi River this morning, as well as a piki-piki. Oh my goodness. So there's 3 vehicles in each of these accidents today. Police at the scene, and unfortunately it's quite terrible. It is a fatal accident, and some human life has been lost. So approaching that area with caution is well advised for now. Other parts of the city we'll take a look at in a short while, but those 2 areas on Thika Road and Mombasa Road today, be very, very careful as you're approaching the CBD. Spice of MKE, that's where you should let us know what you do see in case anybody needs any information from what you experience in your neck of the woods.
There's a lot of coverage on COVID-19 on both papers. What's the nation headline?
Well, yeah, it is COVID-19 on the nation headline today. COVID lives and stories of the ones we have lost. Gone in 4 months, and it goes on to give a little bit of a bio of some of these individuals who've unfortunately lost their lives to this. Do you know anyone who has died of COVID? This is the answer. The faces and names of Kenyans whose story has come to a painful halt and whose dreams are dead. These are real people, dads, mums, brothers, sisters, daughters, uncles, and aunties who have fallen victim to the virus. But even as the infection tears through the community like a freight train and the rate of fatality rises in leaps and bounds, you don't have to join them. You can still save yourself and those you love. This is a special report on a few pages of The Nation today. And it says it's back to the drawing board for Kagwe as cases increase. Subheadline, he is juggling several strategies to control infections while contact tracing has proved quite difficult. And he has now bought rapid response vehicles for counties. 5 counties have seen an increase in their average daily new coronavirus cases in the last 5 days in comparison to the previous weeks, according to data compiled by The Nation. New infections nationwide also surged, and this is worrying Health CS Mutai Kagwe, who said, in the past few days, we have observed an upsurge in the number of positive cases. Kiambu, Machakos, Kajiado, and Nakuru are among the counties with the biggest increases. Kiambu saw more than 60% increase between July 1st and July 6th, as the county recorded 125 cases. This number shot up to 207 cases from 6th July until yesterday. Hospitalizations have risen so much that intensive care centers are full. The government instituted a lockdown of certain areas and limiting movement in and out of Nairobi, but when those measures were gradually lifted, health experts warned of seeing spikes in a new coronavirus infection because some of the counties have done little to improve their readiness to look after patients.
Yeah. The question that keeps coming to my mind is, all right, so within 6 days, we are seeing a rise in the number of positive cases being reported from various counties. This is not necessarily because people have moved into those counties from other parts. We can't really say that that's the case.
No.
Because, look, come on. How long is it taking for samples to be taken, for samples to get to Kemri or the influenza center, for those results to come back, and then we are attributing that to the specific county?
No, it's going to take some time. I mean,
part of the problem was, should we say, a tussle for... I'm trying to really think of a polite word to use. Let me just abandon the politeness.
Throw it into the sea.
Yeah, I'm going to throw it into the sea. The influenza center and Kemri, they seem to have been a tussle for resources. Okay, they seem to have been an issue.
Yeah.
which tells me that outside forces had come to interfere with the process. KEMRI has been known to have the capacity and has had the capacity for the longest time since the days of HIV. Okay, the PCR machine you keep hearing of, the PCR machine is the same machine that was used with regard to HIV.
Yep.
The difference is now the reagents that you use for testing this new virus. And KEMRI has had that capacity. So every time you hear of there being a problem, it means something has hindered the testing to take place. It doesn't mean that the capacity to test has gone down or it isn't there. No. Now, right now, when you hear that there was a backlog, the backlog, in my opinion, probably just means this. Yes, samples were taken, but somehow there wasn't sufficient, should we say...
the reagents to all the
yes,
transport.
the support system, that
everything else that should work.
in order for the results to come out.
Yeah.
Okay, was not readily available. And you see now, again, and yet there has been money for these things.
Right.
See, therein lies the problem. Now, then KEMRI has come out and clearly and categorically stated that there are certain things they're not going to be doing from now on.
Yeah.
Okay, and what we read in the papers is that there are people who are charging their patients and yet taking their samples to KEMRI where they would not be charged. So again, it's all these issues that we tend to have now playing out in the arena of testing. Do you remember the same issue arose with blood?
Yeah.
There was the issue of why is it that there are only 1.5, and I mean 1.5 centers where blood, yes, can actually be tested to determine whether it is something that the blood can actually be used safely.
Yep.
And yet, we knew that there were something like 6 centers where the testing could take place.
Yeah.
Same story.
Same story.
Support
Same.
system lacking.
Same story.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the unfortunate thing is that it appears like the battle is pitting between the National Influenza Center and KEMRI, and those two are basically not even involved in any kind of tussle. Each of those organizations is doing what each of those organizations does.
Very true.
The National Influenza Center, on a regular basis, that's their daily job.
That's what they do.
That's what they do. It's influenza. This is an influenza-like
Specifically influenza.
disease. So here we go. I mean, so we're seeing the number of cases rising. We are seeing that new story and the new push to show that, look, if we don't take care, we are likely to spill out of this thing is likely to spill out of control. So you've read there that the nation is saying our ICUs are full. It's not that they are full with COVID patients.
No.
It's
The other
because an ICU
diseases
is an
are
ICU.
still, exactly. It's still there are people who still require intensive care
Rick,
with other conditions.
You know what is actually of interest with regards to ICUs? If you look at the cases of just the numbers of people who would be admitted into ICUs long before COVID, they were always full.
Yep. ICUs were always full to capacity.
Yes.
By nature of the
HDU
fact
as
that
well.
by nature of the fact that it is an ICU is that they're fewer.
There were fewer.
They're always fewer than what you would get regular admission beds in a hospital.
Yep.
And there are always conditions that require that. People could be in ICU with malaria. People could be in ICU for conditions having to do with HIV, for conditions or complications with pregnancy. So many things. And those issues, as CT keeps saying, have not gone anywhere.
No, they haven't.
They're still there.
They're still there.
So we're adding COVID on top of all of this.
The issues you're going to be dealing with will be on a grand scale. Now, it's not that there is no visible solution in the horizon. No. If all this nonsense that we keep seeing around us, if it could be brought to a halt, and then there'd be sanity.
If we went back to focusing, remember the first couple of weeks, the focus and attention was on one thing.
And it was serious.
COVID.
Yes.
Now we are back. We are doing, I don't know what.
We're back to a normal
Parliament.
yes.
Who traveled back from
Who
work?
has gone
Yes.
where? This is it. This is where we are now losing the focus and turning back and telling the president, "Wait, what are you doing?"
If you look back, Eric, as you correctly put it, there was a time where we were actually containing this thing. We were sorting it out. It wasn't something alarming. People said, it doesn't exist. Of course.
It was interesting because look at the numbers. And having tipped over the 10,000 case mark just yesterday, and Dr. Amoth had said that this would happen in April.
Yeah.
And people said, we're never going to get to 10,000. Well, voila.
Here we are.
It is.
Here we are at 10,000.
There are countries that didn't think that, and they're doing 10,000 a day.
Yeah. We have states who are doing 15,000 a day.
Yes,
In
exactly.
the US. So, I mean, they would say, oh, it's not going to be a big deal. I can go to the beach, for crying out loud. It's not going to spread.
Come
And
on,
here we
just
are.
let me go.
Yeah. And here we are. Here we are. We have countries that open schools. Now, you can imagine. Let's look at some countries. Let's look at India. And then also, let's look at Nigeria in West Africa. Schools, the announcement was given that schools were going to open in August as the school year began. Okay.
All the schools.
Everybody
that is why
prepared.
I'm saying this thing of it, go back to school.
The cases rose.
No, let me just
And
ask
the federal
question.
government came back and made an announcement and said, halt.
No.
Schools
The
are not
case we're
opening. Stop
discussing
it.
was not open all schools. We're saying let the standard 8s and Form 4s go to school.
We are talking about 1.8 million people, CT. That's
Yes.
the thing. 1.8 million people. You're saying
Yes.
allow some movement.
They're not
for
going to one
1.8
school,
million.
Eric.
No, it's 1.8 million people, part of our population. And
Yes.
you're saying let them go to some places. There will be 500 here, 200 there, 100 here, 70 here, 70 the other. There's an issue there. But anyway, let's contain the conversation for now. At 7:15, there is a new portal by the Kenya Ports Authority, and it is Captain Cargo. And the Captain Cargo portal is basically for information. It gives you a lot of information. You want to know what the port operations are, how you can access the port, how you can use the port services if you wanted to export and import. So today, would you like to import something?
CT actually had whispered in my ear previously that he was looking at bringing in some PPEs, wants to cash in on the issues that we are currently
Yes, there is a
enjoying.
demand for PPEs.
Uh-huh. And avocados went well, so you decided...
The avocados went swimmingly.
Should
Okay.
talk to Charity Ngilu, CT, and just buy from her. What do
No.
you want to import?
No. The factory I want to buy from doesn't just manufacture PPEs for the sake of manufacturing PPEs.
Okay.
They export these PPEs to countries that have really serious standards in the Western world. Now, some of the PPEs that we manufacture here, it has been reported that they have issues and they don't meet certain standards.
Okay.
I do not want to take chances.
You want to make sure that whatever
I
it
want
is
to
that
make
you're
sure
delivering
that the
is sound.
standards that are being met by these PPEs are of international repute.
Well, if you were to go to the portal, Captain Cargo had a few some information for you, and so today we're going to look at how it makes it easier for you to do this. So you've wrapped up your cargo. Where are you importing from, CT?
The one place which is a one-stop shop, China.
Oh, okay. So your stuff, voila, surprise, surprise, it's coming from China. Okay, and we're going to go through those steps today and see how it will be easy for you to keep a track or keep a nose on what exactly is going on and how these precious things will come into the country.
John, the producer, is whispering in my ear. CT, why don't you consider importing the cure from Madagascar?
He has that opportunity. So I think it's a good suggestion.
So John, also follow the conversation.
And then you can find out how Captain Cargo can help you import the cure
Import the
from
mitishamba
Madagascar.
from Madagascar.
Maybe he wanted a partnership.
You want a partnership? Well, that is a good thought,
Utaweza mpatia pesa kidogo.
so long as it remains in that particular form of thought.
Okay.
It's good.
Okay, back to China, where CT has found his way into the stuff that had been donated by Jack Ma, and he wants to import it as his own.
We're just
and sell it to
assuming
us.
it's a different batch. Okay.
Uh-huh.
So you are the supplier, all right, CT. You've arranged for cargo inspection to take place, and it must conform with the pre-shipment verification of conformity to standards, what we're going to call now the PVOC. All right. Now, once you get your inspection has conformed with the PVOC, then your partner, which you would have gotten information through your agent, will issue a certificate of conformity. You'll have your certificate, and then your cargo is loaded on the vessel and shipped there in Guangzhou. All right? So now we're on step 3 where it has been loaded, and you can find all this information. You can track and trace as it's making its way to Kenya. The 4th step in this is that your consignments which are destined for Kenya, you apply for what is called an IDF, which is an import declaration form from KRA. Your stuff is in order. You've put everything that you need down on this form, and they give you this form, and the process has now begun.
So that's it. Step 1, 2, and 3.
Step 1, 2, 3, and 4.
You know, this thing would be made so much easier if someone could tell me of a company that actually has containers that are not only digitalized, but which have the capacity to tell me, one, of the weight of the products I am importing, that even have the capacity to have a camera within that particular container so I can see my goods. So that when they arrive at the port of Mombasa, I can, without a shadow of doubt, not just know, but ascertain. Two, I'll be able to track it on my computer.
Okay.
So you want a camera in the container?
I am informed that there are containers that can do that.
Okay.
They are smart containers.
Okay.
Yes.
You'll tell us about that as well. Step 1 to 4 of the Captain Cargo processing documents for importing cargo. This you can find on www.kpa.co.ke/Captain Cargo, and this KARGO.
Classic soul, R&B, smooth jazz, neo soul, and nostalgic ballads.
Make some noise.
You're listening to Spice FM.
All right, we're still taking a look at interesting stories.
Right, so looking to counties a little bit, the Dongo Kundu bypass closed as cracks appear on the key road. The Kenya National Highways Authority has closed part of Mombasa's southern bypass for 2 days to allow engineers to investigate and repair cracks that have appeared on parts of the road. Kenya Director General David Mundinia said subterranean movement caused cracks on a section of the Dongo Kundu bypass that is adjacent to the Mombasa International Airport. A section of the cut slope along the Miriti Mwache Kipevu Road and adjacent to the fence line have been observed to exhibit movement as a result of previous moisture ingress. I don't even know what that means, but all right. Basically, the road has cracked because of movement of the earth. It's interesting because this is something that's been happening over time, and it's good that this has been found in advance of time. Just goes to show that geographical movement in the area over the years has increased, and we're talking about now the core of the earth still shifting in a manner, and we see now the direct results of that. But I'll say a good job on Kenha for finding this out before it would have caused a major disaster in that area. No.
What?
Why?
Is that area known to have such shifts? There's a reason why I'm asking this. You see, this project is a massive project. It's not just a question of roads. There's talk about building a bridge.
Yep.
There's talk about extending the port to that particular area. And there's a much, much bigger surface available for a port than the one we have at Kilindini Harbour. Okay.
And there's a special economic zone coming up
In that,
around
yes,
same
exactly.
area.
So all these things are going to require some fairly heavy duty construction. All right? And which means they are going to dig into the earth to create the sort of foundations you require for this structure. Much deeper than the ones you require for a road. If there is teutonic movements, if there's movement of the earth in this particular area as we see it, then you know what you're saying is that this entire project that we're talking about has to be reconsidered. Yes.
It would, because if they're talking about subterranean movement over the last few years, and because cracks don't appear, it won't be one movement and then a crack will appear. This is something that has taken place over time.
But also, remember, that is one explanation. Cracks also appear if the road is substandard.
That could be another thing.
If you do not, remember, just basic rain moves earth. Rain. Okay? So if you do not if you don't have the sort of foundation that such a road is supposed to have,
Yep.
and with the sort of rains we've been having, there will be movement.
Yep.
If it dries up, again, there
will be
is movement.
And the engineers know this.
They're
They
doing their
do.
investigations over the next couple of
Let
days.
them
and they
do
will
that.
See.
As we come to the top of the hour, let me just give this one. So we have been talking about this move by the Environment Ministry to reclaim part of its forest land, all right, in Nairobi, and this would affect some estates in Langata. So the CS for Environment was in Parliament yesterday, and he says, you know, one of my predecessors is the one who had actually degazetted this piece of land, and he had irregularly degazetted part of Ngong Forest, paving way for grabbing by private investors. And the minister in question is Francis Lotodo. So this is Keriako Tobiko, who was in Parliament yesterday, and he was telling MPs, you know, and here are Hansard reports that also show that there was this conversation that was happening. Francis Lotodo went and told Parliament, we are excising part of this forest so that there can be social amenities put up. And what we are thinking of is putting up a school. Lo and behold, you have a couple of estates. So the CS basically is saying, we don't want really to demolish this. It's possible for you, Parliament, to go ahead and ratify this and ensure that then the Kenya Forest Service can give a leasehold to these people for about 50 years. So now the owners of these particular properties can come together and apply to Kenya Forest Service and have this conversation, and we see a conclusion to this.
Eric, do you know how far that Ngong Forest extended to? Kenya, what was previously Kenya Science?
All the way.
That was part of Ngong. So the
Met was in the forest.
Forest, okay? And just keep going. The Nana School, forest. Then go to the other side. That's where now all these lovely estates come in. You're talking about an area that was in excess of 7,000 hectares?
A
Okay.
lot.
Now, there's less than 3.
Coming to the top of the hour, shortly we'll be on KTN Home. So just stick here with us because it's the situation in Kenya's biggest conversation. We will start the hour with CT Muga's proverb so that everybody can hear this proverb even as we join in this the KTN Home audience. It's a situation room. It's Kenya's biggest conversation. We'll be having discussions about youth and leadership for the next 2 hours. Good morning. It's 7 o'clock.
All right. Still considering that accidents happened far on Mombasa Road today, and the police are still there trying to clear that up. That is affecting traffic coming from Kitengela, coming from Athi River, and then onto Mombasa Road today. It was quite the grisly one, and it was a fatal one. So if you're approaching that area, please be extremely careful. Outbound, however, on Mombasa Road, you'll still have some issues around Cabanas. It's building up, and doing so quite quickly. Getting yourself to General Motors will take a bit of time this morning. The accident at Kawasukari just past Kenyatta University that involved 3 vehicles is still waiting for emergency services to turn up and sort that out. It is affecting traffic on that road as well. So we have traffic as far back as that turnoff and that junction, so it's going to be a bit crazy. We can predict that already. Gong Road, Langata Road, coming out of Westerns doesn't look so bad. Getting into the CBD will not be too much of a headache today. We'll take a look at how things open up in other counties as well as on these major roads today. The eastern and southern bypasses are open and no problems so far, so good. Spice FMKE, that's how you can reach us on Twitter in case you run into something that we should know about. Don't hesitate to let us know.
This is The Situation Room, the home of hard-hitting political commentary and penetrating insights about the state of the nation. This is a talk radio experience like no other. The Situation Room, a place for hard truths, debates, and elevated conversations. The Situation Room, witty, political, engaging, deep, controversial. In the room, we have CT Muga,
2.5
researcher,
minutes after 7 o'clock. Good morning and thank you very much for tuning in to Spice FM, Nairobi 94.4,
politically
Mombasa
uncertain times.
102.5 in Kisumu and the
Nigerian
environs,
by birth,
Nakuru
Kenyan by
96.0,
choice, communications
96.7 in
expert,
Eldoret,
Pan-Africanist,
90.9 in
a truth
Nyeri,
seeker and believer
97.7 in
in people
Malindi.
power.
We broadcast this show from Nairobi
Eric
to the world.
Latin, agent provocateur, the man in the chair,
as well as
seasoned
on our
journalist,
social media
Newshound,
handles.
a
We are
man
live
who
streaming
believes
on
in
YouTube,
punching
Spice
up,
FMKE.
not
We are
down.
also live streaming on
This
Facebook,
is the
Spice
Situation
FMKE,
Room,
and Twitter,
the only
Spice
way to
FMKE.
start your...
And now we're also on KTN Home. Good morning, audience on KTN Home. Thank you very much for welcoming us to your home. In the room this morning is CT Muga, Eric Latif, and Nduoko. Will be joined shortly by our guest host, Narima Wako-Ojiwa. She is the CEO of Siasa Place. We'll be talking about the place of youth in leadership. The leaders of tomorrow, what are they doing today? But first, let's begin with today's proverb from CT Muga.
This proverb comes from Egypt. Do a good deed and throw it into the sea.
Lose it.
Let it float away. Let it not be something that...
Don't hold on to a good deed that you've done.
Well, usually what that means is you anticipate that some good deed may come back your way as a result of your good deed. You're saying, leave it.
Let it go.
Just do the good deed.
All right. Kenyanizing it is tenda wema nenda zako.
And focus on the nenda zako.
That more importantly, right?
Yes, exactly.
More importantly, nenda zako. So before we get our guest host to come in, we are talking about youth and leadership. And, you know, we started this conversation a bit earlier. where we're saying it's always said that the youth are the future leaders of tomorrow. And it's usually put in those words. Future leaders and tomorrow must appear in this phrase.
That phrase, unfortunately, is often related to politicians. And they repeat it so often, you actually begin to think that there's some truth to it.
You're saying there's no truth?
No, I'm saying the truth is much broader than it would seem or it would sound. You see, when a politician says you'll be the leader of tomorrow, what then one may assume is that leadership has to do with politicking. And yet, leadership, you don't need to grow up to be a leader. No. People become prefects when they're in standard 1, even nursery school. That's leadership. Even if it isn't a school setting and you're playing football with your mates, somebody will be captain. That's leadership.
Yep.
I think there already is, I'm sure, but there needs to be an emphasis on understanding what leadership actually entails.
So it's about definition of leadership.
Definition and giving it context. Yes, because there are leaders in every sphere. Like the guest we're having today is a leader. The guest we'll have after this is also a leader.
Yep.
Yes, these are leaders. And when they talk about groupings, the moment you talk about a grouping, groupings will have somebody who will sort of speaks on behalf of that group. That is a leader. And they aren't the only ones. There'll be others who have. So long as somebody has a function that is a representative of others, you are in a position of leadership.
I think also that every time you talk about tomorrow and the future, then it kind of gives kind of like a comfort zone, because then you're in the thinking. It's like, all right, I don't have to do anything until now. But to understand that in whatever sphere of life that you find yourself in, you actually can be a leader. You can lead. But that means that you don't have to wait until tomorrow for that to happen. There are certain things that can take place today. There are certain things that you can do as individuals that will groom you or even your surroundings to take on that position of leadership. There are certain things that you can get involved in now. So there's really that tomorrow, to me, oftentimes is a crutch, because I heard it, I've been hearing it, this tomorrow, it seems like it would never come. Or this future is a place whereby very few people will ever visit, you know? And the future just never does arrive.
I guess the other misconception is by the youth hearing this, they expect to be handed over that mantle of leadership.
Yeah.
So, you're sitting
when
there
we're
wondering,
done, we'll give it to you.
So when is this that I'm going to be a leader? So it's like you're waiting to be told to be, bestowed upon a leadership, or for the prophet to come
And inform you.
and anoint you with oil and say, now, from this day henceforth,
hand over to
Nduoko, you are now the king or the queen. No, it just basically means that I think if you look at it from the context of what is it that your parents are telling you or your elders are telling you, then they're telling you that brace yourself for the responsibility that's coming your way. Because in a few years' time, you will have the responsibility of this entire nation that we have. So it's upon you to grow up knowing that you have something to do, to contribute. You have some expectations from the society.
It actually starts with looking after yourself.
Yeah.
That as you grow up, part of the reason why you anticipate to go through an education system or some training is so that you can earn your own keep. That's where the leadership begins. You cannot talk about looking after other people if you can't look after yourself, can you? So it starts with you being able to actually look after yourself well.
Yep.
Then that's a good testimony of your ability to look after others, because it is clear you have shown it in your own life that you're able to. But if your own life is in shambles, utter confusion, and you want to convince others that you are able to help lead their lives, nah.
You're going to have to do a
That
little
isn't
bit
going
more
to
of a
add up.
convincing
Nobody's
job.
going to entrust their livelihoods with you.
No, they will
And this
not.
is it. Even if you look back at the traditional way of the customary way of doing things, those rites of passage were graduating into the next level, where a lot more is expected
Of responsibility.
of responsibility, right?
Yes.
So you're a warrior. There's some responsibility that comes with it, and based on how you perform as a warrior in this age group, it also means that when you now become an elder, there's going to be more responsibility, and there's something that they'll be expecting you to do as the next leader, as an elder. So it's basically just that graduation. It's not that there's a time when we'll come and we'll say, oh, now we now have new fresh of leaders, and the older fresh of leaders are going to sit back. No, they simply just graduate. You become warriors. I become an elder.
It doesn't mean that leadership stops on certain levels.
Yeah.
And I do, unfortunately, this is the thing, and we keep, if we go back to that tomorrow, it's not a time that you wait for, essentially. It's something that you do, and I actually think that phrase should be changed. To now is the time for leadership. It's not about tomorrow. It's not about the future, because the future is here. It's now. It's here. The future that we've been talking about for the last 20 or so years is here with us now. The people who were entrusted this leadership role or leadership position, guess what? There are people coming behind who are ready to take it on.
But so remember,
what would you give up?
There is space for tomorrow, because you may have the sort of abilities that make it possible for you to take on ably the responsibility of other people's lives, but you don't apply yourself. In such a case, that tomorrow will apply, because you aren't doing it now, but you're able to. So that tomorrow will apply to such individuals.
Take the chances. Take your chances now.
Yes.
Now let's introduce our guest for the next couple of hours. Nerima Wako Ojiwa, good morning, and thank you very much for joining us.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
Karibu sana. Traffic is bad.
Yeah. I
Kenyan
underestimated. I thought it would be a lot smoother, but things look like they're getting back to some normal.
Look like they're getting back to some normal?
Some normal.
Where
I
have
wouldn't
you
say
been? Welcome to
totally.
Jerusalem.
She's probably new to Jerusalem.
Yes, I think so.
Wow.
Yes, okay.
Nerima is the CEO of Siasa Place, and she is also, a political analyst. She is a youth leader, and that's what we're saying. Leadership is not about tomorrow, but anyway, we'll be discussing about that, and we're asking our question this morning: what are tomorrow's leaders doing today? Yeah. So start by first of all telling us what Siasa Place is all about.
Siasa Place is an NGO founded in 2015. We focus on educating young people on the constitution, governance processes, inclusion, and we mainly look at policies that touch on young people. So we work a lot with government, civil society, youth groups as well. But I think the importance of understanding what we're about is why we called ourselves Siasa. And it's because we felt that Siasa is normally given a negative connotation. Specifically, politicians just come to young people when they want your vote, and that's it. You don't see them again for the next 5 years. And a lot of times we educate young people that politics is actually everyday living. What your representative is doing, you understanding accountability, social accountability, considering that this constitution gives a lot of direct power to the public. Young people do not understand that or the processes that exist. So that's what we do in a nutshell. We are very active on social media. So on Twitter, we have engagements every week, including one today on police brutality and protecting young children. And then tomorrow we'll have one probably on mental health. So we normally educate young people on the policies that exist in the country and what we can do to plug in avenues that are normally often ignored.
Just so we're on the same page, when you say young people, who are we talking about?
35 and below. 35 and below.
Is there a threshold below? Below is
Below
Yes.
to what?
0,
To 0?
1, 2, 3.
No. For me, my organization is 35 to 15. That's the age that we focus
Okay.
on. So teens, young adults.
You said you work with the government.
Yes.
How?
In partnership.
Yes. Explain the partnership, please.
A lot of county governments, I would say as of now, like for instance with Kericho County government, we work with MCAs because MCAs are their direct representative. And a lot of times young people would know who their MCA in their ward is, know where that individual lives, because that's one of them. A lot of them are young. About 1,000 MCAs right now are below the age of 35. So we work with them in terms of looking at particular bills, amendments, policies, understanding what the issues are. When they have public fora for public participation, we normally also engage youth groups to support local MCAs, ward administrators. And I think that I say we work with government because a lot of times when people hear of me or see the work that I do, they instantly think that I'm an activist. Yes, I am. But it's also to say that it's not that we do not criticize government. We do. Even International Youth Day is coming up. It's in August 12th. We're working with the national government in supporting them for International Youth Day events in August with the Office of the President. So it's not that we always bash our government and protest.
But you do bash them from time to time.
When they do the wrong thing and when they do the right thing, we support them
necessary.
and we acknowledge them. Yeah. And criticism is good.
Yep.
What you do sounds to me remarkable.
Thank you.
How do you measure the effectiveness of these initiatives that you have?
I think for us, the impact is the growth of youth groups. There's a bit of a shift because we're moving from, I think I was listening to you guys talking about Saba last week, and even the fact that we had several young people arrested on that day. And there was an argument that those young people don't understand what the essence of democracy or participation is. But then now when we look at youth organizing, it's not necessarily institutional organizing. It's not registering an organization, which many have turned into that. People joined parties. A lot of activists back then, including Governor Kibwana, was an activist, and we can go on and on. And now they've created these mechanisms that look very official and institutionalized. So right now, young people are organizing in terms of movements, and I think very fluid. And I think also there's this mix between an online and offline action, which you cannot necessarily plug into an entity. And I feel that a lot of people are having, especially when we're talking about older institutions, donor organizations, bigger entities, are having a harder time understanding that new form.
Or engaging.
Yeah.
What is that difference between movement and institution? Because you clearly seem to have drawn a line. There is
a line.
Institutions and there is movement.
Absolutely, because right now if you were to ask social justice centers, something else that's growing, they will say that they are movement. But then that's because the leadership is organic. That's because they also don't necessarily believe in having paperwork reporting an office. All of us are part of this because it's ingrained in our community. And so there's that sense of ownership.
How exactly
and
is it
belonging.
ingrained in your community?
And maybe I can ask a question that would be related to that, Nerima. If we're looking at young people specifically and the people that you've come in contact with, do people feel or understand their place in all of this, or are they going with the winds of change? And I'll ask this, if we look at the major movements that happened in the world, we look at the hippie movement in the 70s, majority of the people went along with the times. Look at the Black Panther movement in the United States. A lot of people went along with it because it sounded like the cool thing to do without understanding the fundamental issues of the movement. If we look at the Arab Spring, majority led by young people in the Arab countries, North Africa. Again, a lot of people went with it because it sounded like something that they should be part of. Do we have here a fundamental understanding of young people's place in a movement for things like social justice and things like economic good and growth? Is there a fundamental understanding of the importance of why of this?
Yes, there is. And social justice networks are beginning those conversations. Every Tuesday, they meet and talk about different activists around Africa that have made specific changes and understanding what the influence of that change is. But they're small. These are pockets. Right now, there are only 16 that exist in our country. Majority of them are in urban slum areas. Now, when you talk about the majority population, 75% being below the age of 35, you will see that as a drop in the ocean. So I think that the more we continue to see that our country is growing, we talk about the youth bulge, we talk about the demographic dividend, and we begin to see we really need to think about what our future will look like. We are very many, and if our governance is not good governance, then we're the ones who are going to have
a problem with it. This leadership is not going to live more than 2 decades. And so I think that's where we're beginning to see initiatives such as mine or youth-serving organizations coming together. And there's even a network that was formed last year of youth-serving organizations that are specifically focusing on how can young people use their energy, their momentum, and be educated on the history of even democracy or social justice.
I'm going to assume that some of the groups that you work with then share some synonymity, right? So what would you say, I mean, across groups or even across individuals, what is the general thinking of today's leadership? Let's just take Kenya as an example.
Access to dignity. I would say all of us, whether we're in ICT, business, agriculture, for me, governance, all of us want young people to have the dignity of living in this country. There's a lot of systemic changes that are happening that I don't think we realize. One, I can talk about even the Universities Amendment Act of 2016. Duale bill that people call. And so then the president assented it. It just meant that university students couldn't directly vote for their leadership. So you might think, what does that have to do with anything? It has to do with everything. Because the fact that even our very political leadership had their interaction with politics or the beginning of their political life on campus, and then you take that away from an entire generation. That basically means that you're preparing them to understand that there's a leadership that's selected. And that's why I say that this even playing around with a referendum, don't joke with it, because it's already been practiced in the university settings. And I can go further, because even when we look at the National Youth Council, they've been working on amending it, where there's been debate whether they can remove the elections. Now, that's for young people who are not in institutions. That's for young people who are not in formal education, to be able to represent their young representative in this council that is the State Department Youth Voice of the country. So when they're removing that as well, then that means they're not only removing it from a class of young people, they're removing it from the entire nation. And so that's why I feel that there are a lot more challenges than just what do young people want? What are you up to? There are actually systems being put in place to keep them marginalized and also so completely diversified. And even when we look at young people not being devolved, youth is not devolved, but youth are everywhere. But then if you go to one county, the youth office is in another department, and you'll ask me, what does that have to do with anything? It has to do with everything. If I can't go to one office for my issues, when I have a problem, I'm completely confused as to where to go. A lot of young people complain about being frustrated and worn out when they just want to apply or, do something. Then why would I do anything? A lot of them stop.
Well, it also talks about, a county government not having direct and clear programs on the youth, on what they are doing for the youth. If it's jumbled up all over, it's mixed up youth plus something else. In one county, it's youth and environment.
Yes.
Another one, it's youth and
business
and
ICT.
Business and ICT. Then it becomes all completely mixed up. But I want to come back to these small pockets of youth engaging at various levels, and you're calling them, for example, the social justice networks. Are you saying that this just spring up out of nowhere? Are they just ad hoc, or are they organized?
I believe they're a combination of both. Not just spring up anywhere. I think that when there is an issue that occurs, like for the instance, I was talking about Mathare with police brutality, then you will see an uprising of people wanting to join something, to do something about that. And those entities exist. So we are also seeing where there's a bit of a generational, I'll talk about it about an intergenerational exchange. And that's also something that's lacking, because we have individuals who understand the history of this country, but then you don't necessarily find it in our textbooks or in our education systems. But then we also know that culturally, because I also wrote about this in my column last week, how culturally we are individuals or people that love stories and music, But then when you look at the art industry or music industry in our country, it's completely underfunded. And even when we talk about the family setting or going to the village, and these are stories that would be told by your grandmother and aunties like that, there's now that breakdown where we're not transferring. So I feel there was a sense of responsibility that was passed down. And I feel that there's been a breakdown of that sense of responsibility, where even when you have young people also becoming parents or teenage moms, and you have cases of families where they are constantly working to survive, then it becomes less about building family and values.
This situation that you describe so ably, is it new?
No, I don't believe that it is, but I think that how it's transferred is what's new.
Remember, we're in the 21st century, and one of the things that this country is perhaps clearly known for and we achieve consistently is a population increase. So, given that we're a growing population as a country, what you describe, or what you've been describing, is likely to increase. The disparities you describe likely to increase, but does it only affect the youth?
I think that it will affect majority of the youth.
It will affect the majority because they are greater in number,
Yes,
not because they're being discriminated against.
they are. They are. Because right now, if you were to ask a young person what their main problem is, they would say the economy. They
And you
would
think
not
it's a
talk
problem
about-
for only young people, or is it a problem for the nation as a whole?
It's a nationwide
Yeah.
problem, maybe, but also if more than
Most of them.
75% of that population comprises this particular demographic, then now that's why
Yes.
we're talking about that particular. Let's come back to that conversation the way we just started on it. It's 26 minutes after 7. This is the Situation Room. It's Kenya's biggest conversation, broadcasting on Spice FM and KTN Home. In the studio with us this morning is Nerema Waka Ojiwa. She is the CEO of Siasa Place. We are discussing the place of youth in leadership and governance this morning. In the room as well is CT Muga, Nduoko, and Eric Latif.
All right, let's look at how it may have changed on the skies in Nairobi today. We're looking at cloudy conditions for most parts of the morning at 14 degrees. We'll see highs of 22 and lows of 12. In Nyeri at 13 degrees and mostly cloudy. A wet afternoon is forecasted with highs of 21 and lows of 13. And in Nakuru, 14 degrees and mostly cloudy. We'll see rain conditions in the afternoon with highs of 21 and lows of 12. It's a cloudy morning in Eldoret at 12 degrees. We'll see thunderstorms in the afternoon with highs of 18 and lows of 11. It's mostly cloudy in Kisumu at 19 degrees, highs of 26 and lows of 18 with showers for most parts of the day. Kakamega follows in suit, 16 degrees and cloudy conditions this morning. Showers expected later with highs of 23 and lows of 14. 23 degrees in Mombasa this morning. Clear skies, however. It'll change later into showers with highs of 29 and lows of 23. 25 degrees and mostly sunny in Malindi. Highs of 28 and lows of 24. Outside of Kenya, 18 degrees in Kampala. 24 degrees at the high and lows of 18 with cloudy conditions for most parts of the afternoon into rain. Dar es Salaam at 22 degrees is mostly sunny. That'll change later though. Highs of 29 and lows of 22. And Johannesburg, 3 degrees this morning. It's cooling down as the hours tick by. Highs of 11 and lows of -2. And for now, in Lagos, 24 degrees and partly cloudy. It'll change to showers very soon. Highs of 28 and lows of 23. Looking really good on Thika Road right now, where we saw the accidents earlier on around Kahasukari. That is not so bad now. It's been cleared up, and then inbound on Thika Road, getting towards the Pangani Underpass, joins with traffic from Kiambu Road as well as Muthaiga Corner. But it's not too bad. It's a day for celebration on Thika Road, I'll say. On Mombasa Road today, it's also looking not so bad. We had that grisly accident up ahead around Kitengela. And then joining with the road that comes from Athi River. That's not so bad either. Coming then down to Cabanas and the General Motors area, we'll have an open way because it's not terrible. So the bypasses, eastern and southern, looking really good from what we see right now. Getting into the CBD from Gong Road, Langata Road and Westlands as well. Not looking too terrible. It's a good Tuesday, I'll say. Let us know what you see. Spice FM KE. That's how you can reach us on Twitter. Let's know what's happening in your neck of the woods and we can share that information to keep everybody moving.
It is the Situation Room on Spice FM, broadcasting from Nairobi around the country. 87.9 in Mombasa, 102.5 in Kisumu. Nakuru, we are on 96.0. We are on 96.7 in Eldoret, Nyeri 90.9 and Malindi 97.7. And are also streaming on KTN Home as well as our digital platforms, KTN this is spicefm.co.ke on Facebook, YouTube and Twitter, as well as www.spicefm.co.ke. In the room is Eric Latif, Nduo Call CT Muga, and our guest host for today is Nerima Wako Ojiwa. She is the CEO of Siasa Place. Before we went into the break, CT, you were saying, well, all these things that Nerima, you're saying that the youth are facing, everybody is facing them. And you were to respond to that.
I was, and I'll say, yes, everybody's facing, but I also mentioned that young people are the majority. And the fact that we're also dealing with other dynamics, including climate change, including access to water, lack thereof, water rationing, power rationing. There are many other challenges that even right now we can talk about this pandemic that perhaps when you were that age, you would not deal with, or even access to food. The fact that bread
you see
costs.
Giving me I'm not a good example to give because maybe in my youth we didn't have a problem with power outages. Power outages presume that you are
those power.
That is electricity. Okay.
Oh, okay. I was talking about water.
Yes, you're presuming that one has running water.
No, even the river, even the toxic
when I was
in
a
our
young person,
pesticides.
Rivers did not have those problems.
But they do now.
Right now, they do. the point I was trying to make was not to diminish the effect that what we have right now is having on young people. I was merely trying to say this. One, there's a whole group of young people who are still dependent on their parents and people who are older. And these older people face the very same things that you are saying. So of necessity, those who are younger will also face these problems. That's number one.
Mm-hmm.
Number two, I am also saying that because you are young, because when one is young, put it that way, your worldview is actually influenced by that, your youthfulness. You see it in one way, and somebody who is much, much older would actually see it differently. It doesn't diminish the effect it has on you. No, it doesn't. But the reality is this. If you take this argument even further back to an earlier point in the previous century, then you would find that young people had their work cut out for them. And if you transpose that into modern times, you would say these people were being introduced into slave labor. Because what you did was you woke up, you're the person who woke up the earliest, you're the one who made sure that there was water, that cows were milked, and then you went to the farm. Okay? Because most of our people lived in an agrarian setup.
Not to forget, you took care of your siblings.
Yes, you
and
did.
there were quite a litany of them.
Still doing that,
Right.
though.
That's still happening.
It's still happening, yeah.
It's still going
Yeah.
on in the same with the same kind of effect
Yeah.
to this current generation. The issue though is like you said, so the youth are the majority, comprising over 75%. 2/3 of the country is basically people below 35, right? So the what I heard you intimating is that the minority are making decisions for the majority. So there are very many decisions that are being made by the minority, that is people who are above 35, that are impacting directly on those that are below 35, and they don't have the kind of worldview that the majority of the population has. So for example, right now, talking about engagements by organizations that would support the kind of youth movements that are springing up. And because they only know one way of dealing with an organization is talk to the leader of this organization. Now they're wondering, so how do we engage with you? The other measures that you're talking about, like breaking up and breaking apart youth engagement in elections at the university level, in elections at the National Youth Council. But all of these are things that require the youth then to stand up and start taking up the mantle now. Which brings up to our today's conversation is, what is it that those leaders of tomorrow are doing today to prepare themselves to take up the mantle tomorrow?
Because a time will come when they will also be in positions. Remember, it's not all of them, just a few. Even right now, we've never had such a big representation of youth in decision-making positions within even government than we've ever had. Now, what is it that is being done to prepare you for that particular role? Because knowing that you represent a very large constituency.
Like I said, as much as we have, as you've mentioned, some of the youngest parliament actually right now, it doesn't mean that they have influence. And I'm not saying that there's any country that we can look to that has done that. Because if we even look at the population of Africa...
Actually we can, but carry on.
Yeah. But if we were to look at the population of Africa in terms of leadership, representatives, they are not... More than 50% being below the age of 35 is not existent.
Yeah.
But then when we talk about the majority population in each African country, more than 60% being young people is true.
So
It's
the
fact.
majority are being led by the minority.
Yes, it is. But my argument is that those who are leading understand the majority. I'm not saying that they have to be 35 and below to be able to understand the majority population. And that's why I even talked about an intergenerational linkage. And that's what we don't have in this country. The challenges that we have, the fact that we're now talking about mental health, where we can say 20 years ago, mental health, you'd be told that is a white person's disease. You cannot talk about that here. It's not part of our culture. You're new chawi. Yeah, it's witchcraft. And so right now we're having conversations where young people are suicidal and talking about depression, and mental health is being considered an issue, and there's a bill being pushed in parliament. So those are some of the changes that I'm talking about that we need to recognize. And a lot of times there's so many traditional and cultural views that are mainly held by the older generation. And those are some of the things that are creating obstacles and stumbling blocks.
How do you propose to change something like this? Because the beliefs that people carry are a byproduct of tradition and culture in a lot of cases. So this is the way in which they were raised, right? The way in which they were brought up to believe certain things and then also to act in a certain manner. How do you divorce the two and say, all right, times have changed? Because that's the truth. A young person growing up 20 years ago and a young person in today's world, totally different. So many dynamics that have forced that change. Where do we even want to start? From social media to new media all over. It's not the same world that these people are being brought up in. So how do we divorce the two and say that the people who are in leadership, who grew up with a different mindset, are now governing those who are in a different space today? How can that work?
I don't think it's possible to divorce. It's also the debate of whether the state and the church can truly divorce. And that's also back to tradition, culture, and beliefs. I think that we do need to have better relationships with generations. We do not have that. And that's why I even talked about the instance of mentorship. That's gone. It's very interesting to hear stories of politicians today who had mentors. Now, it's very difficult for me to even say I have a mentor.
Why?
And because it's not considered a thing to do. It's
don't
not
look in the pool and see
It's not
anybody that you would like to
structured
mentor
No,
you.
it's not structured. Yeah.
But how exactly would you like this mentorship to actually take place? Because if you ask me, my mind goes back. Politicians are always mentoring people.
How?
Well, it can.
Youth wing a campaign
You
manager.
have understood it. I was going to start with Goon Squad. Okay. And then graduate it further.
to campaign manager.
No, send around. There's a difference. Send around. Then they hang arounds. Okay. These people actually learn from the politician. Believe me, they are mentored in ways you couldn't think of. Call it informal learning, but they learn. And they understand. Some may even be drivers, but they learn. And because of their proximity to the so-called elected leader, they see what this person does firsthand. That's mentorship.
It brings you actually to a point where I wanted to ask. You mentioned that we have over 1,000 MCAs around the country who are below 35. Do they have any association to a sitting member of parliament or sitting senator or governor?
Yes.
There is your mentorship.
Yes.
And we're talking about close to about 1,500 MCAs around the country. So if 1,000 are below 35, that means that we have a lot of youth who are participating in a very, very crucial part and organ of this country.
And they are
And
organizing.
this is the county assembly.
Yes, and they call themselves KYMCA, where they are now Kenya Young Members of County Assembly.
Right.
It's not to say that they're not doing anything at all, which goes back to answering your previous question. What are the leaders of today doing?
So what are they doing as
They're-
KYMCA?
Yes, that's KYMCA, there's KYPA,
Where the
there's
problem
YSO.
arises with mentorship, unless you're actually very strong and you're very driven, you are likely to simply regurgitate what your mentor did. So you'll find someone who may be even political leadership, because this is what I was referring to, and had a mentor. The likelihood of them doing something very different is scant. They are more likely to do what they saw their mentor doing. So you may have youthful, very, very youthful leaders by virtue of their age, but they do not think like what you may want. Their thought process is not revolutionary at all.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's pedantic and it is repetitive of what, and that's why.
They are molded by their mentors.
Yes,
so
and
that-
that's why you have this situation so that this quagmire we never seem to get out of. Yes. Because all you have, like you'll find many MCAs, if you look at the processes that they went through, as you said, youth wingers. Remember, I began with
With Goon Squad.
Goon Squad, yes, exactly. And you graduate, because that's often determined by your level of education and your general inclination towards demonstrating violence, okay? And then you realize this doesn't work very well. Then you buy a suit, and that determines your behavior. You feel you can't go around throwing stones if you're wearing a suit,
Yep.
okay? So you limit yourself to just insults, okay? Then you realize even this insulting doesn't work very well. So you graduate slowly. But you see, people also know you. You also have a constituency of younger people who look up to you. And so you actually are a magnet for votes.
You're a community organizer.
Yes. So when something like an MCA's job comes along, goodness, you are in a pole position to actually get elected.
So what you're saying indirectly is that the 1,000 MCAs that we have, because of the association with the older politicians, they have basically just been molded by those older politicians.
Not all.
So that there's a likelihood that the behavior that we see in these youthful MCAs will mirror what we've seen with the older politicians.
Yes, it will. In fact, where I was taking my argument when I asked how does the organization that Nerima CEOs, how it sort of like meshes with the government, I have found that if you really want real influence, start with someone at the level of their education. You see, these things that we speak about, whether it's self-awareness, understanding nationhood, these things actually have to be taught. Forget singing the national anthem.
No.
No, it has to be part of your curriculum. So you grow up learning these things. If you assume that someone's just going to learn them along the way, you've missed it. They will not learn it along the way. The things they learn along the way are the things that are associative. Someone does something because someone else does it. But if they are taught in school, they internalize it.
It's ingrained.
Yes. And you can then relate what you learned to what you experience in life. We don't teach these things in our schools.
And what is what is the heartbeat? What is reverberating amongst young people today? And I'll ask that question against what is seen. A lot of it is that, young people are looking for, their way out, their way to, to be able to have, so that you don't be in a position whereby you're compromised because of your economic situation. To be in that position, to get some level of education, graduate, you start a business that's going to give you something. These things that we speak of that essentially would form a leader, would make a leader, nationhood, understanding governance and leadership and things like that. Do you, from where you sit, forget about what other people see, from where you sit and the people that you work with, do you see that young people actually have imbibed that feeling of saying, this is the Kenya, for example, that I want to fight for, that I want to eventually lead and govern? Because without that, then it would be very difficult to do things later with the kind of heart that you're talking about now.
And it will be almost impossible for them to have activities that are representative of something that would help the populace. What they're likely to do is to do what their mentors did and look after self.
So what do you see, Nerima?
What I see is, and which is why I even talked about educating, because as much as when we go to, say, award meeting with youth, and even we're talking about education and things like that, and our education system is terrible. And even there was a study last week, I think it was in the People Daily, that most young people, I think they studied Kilifi County, I'll have to check my phone, apparently with a class 8 education actually have a class 4 education, okay? So that I can say is the reality on the ground when I meet with youth. And that's why I even talked about Siasa not just being the politics of bantering between politicians, but the everyday understanding of access. And once you educate or you interact with people, young people, on their issues, and for many, it was just health, for instance. For young women, it was just, I just want a clinic that has medication in it and a doctor. That's it for me. Or access to water. And then linking that to services that are supposed to be your basic right, I do see a change. I do see a change. So I'm hopeful. But it's also, it comes from a space of limited information as well. Because here we are talking about these young people, I get the question whether young people really love this country. But even when you have those interactions with youth, a lot of them, what do they see? They see a state that is brutal toward young people. When we talk about even police brutality, a lot of those who are short or afraid of the police, walking in town after 6 p.m. is very scary for a young person, especially if you look like you're loitering and just walking. People get arrested.
Let me ask,
enough people have
how
tried
do you
to
need
help.
to walk to appear like you're loitering?
You get arrested.
No, what I'm asking is, what gait must I adopt? How must I
How
walk?
does this style of walking look?
Even
Yes.
That would
walking,
attract
the way you
the attention
dress,
of the
if you
police.
look like
Walking
an artist,
aimlessly
like me
without
looking like
intent.
this, walking aimlessly.
So you now you look
Yeah.
like
How
you're
do you walk
irresponsible,
aimlessly?
and that you're not
Yes.
doing anything worth
Okay.
being on the
just
street.
walking.
How do you
the
walk purposefully
police
then? Let
office-
me ask that question.
No, and that's the thing.
It
Police
starts from how
will
you
pull
dress.
you over. Yeah.
Oh, the whole
It's how you
judgment
dress.
is from how you
Meaning
dress.
it has nothing to do with
It's
walking.
profiling.
Yeah.
Yes, it has nothing to do with walking. It has nothing to do with the speed with which you're walking or the steps you're taking. It has to do with your youth,
Yep.
your demeanor. You
And
look
that's
young,
our country.
you've been profiled.
You look young, you look idle. You look
Yeah,
not
that's our
gainfully
country.
engaged.
and you look like a problem.
Yep.
Yeah. You do. And so when you come from that
What is it that
space-
this majority can do to engage better? If the youth are a majority in this country, that tells you that even in the police service, they're the majority. So this cuts across the board. So we can't really continue having this conversation about a majority complaining that the minority is suppressing them, and yet the majority has the opportunities.
Not only that, they are the majority even in employment.
Yes. So
I
in
wanted to say
everything that we talk about,
Actually-
public service, no.
Actually, yes.
No.
I honestly see from where
No.
I'm looking at it,
Percentage
Narima, I
wise, no.
think.
So
I
in
think
public service, they're not.
there's a-
They
They're
are
not the
not.
majority.
That's one I'm sure.
All
Public
right.
service, they are not.
in
I'm sure.
other
Other areas.
employment areas,
Yes.
they are.
Yes.
In the informal sector, in informal sector, youth are the majority.
Yes.
Okay. So what is it that the youth can then do
You know,
so that we can just change this paradigm?
Eric,
completely?
First of all, we
Eric,
can
I want,
start by
I
saying-
want,
we
I want
can
us to
start by
clarify
saying
this thing with Nerima.
complaining.
Nerima, public service involves not just people who work in so-called government offices, teachers, public service, police, public service, prison officers, public service, doctors in public service. Public service doesn't advertise and employ old people. The people who join the job market are usually young. So when they are employed, it may not appear so. If you talk about even employment in county governments, they may not be in positions of influence, but the largest number of people who are likely to be employed will be young. This is the point I'm trying to make.
Okay, then I was talking about public service in government. Statistically, 65% are above the age of 55. That is
60% are above the age of 55.
Can you
yes,
imagine?
yes,
Hey!
It's ridiculous.
That's
Something-
why government.
And
that's
this
why
is the government that is now offering services to the
Yes,
majority of the
yes.
young
If
people. There's a problem.
That is true.
If those statistics are true,
It is.
something is fundamentally wrong somewhere.
That's why government has tried initiatives to attract young people into the public service.
And what are some of these initiatives that you talk about?
There's the internship one where they had 3,000 youth to be interned at the public service.
Yeah.
But even that, the reporting was showing that they didn't transition well. Right now, they've also launched a new one where they're asking young people to apply. Again, it's a sort of a 1-year fellowship during this period. So they are trying to use different initiatives through the Public Service Commission.
And in your opinion, has this worked? And if it is not working, what's the reason why it wouldn't work? I'm getting to something here. Why is it not working?
The challenges, just a few. One is even the way government documents, still paperwork, still filing. Number
Youth are
two,
lazy not to.
huh?
Youth
Ati youth
too
are lazy.
Youth are too lazy to file paper.
We can document in other ways, actually, without utilizing too much storage space.
I see. You see, this is how the person who's
It's not being
mentoring.
lazy.
This is, and I'm just saying, this is how
It's
the person,
progressing
the
with
person,
the times.
the
We
person
need to
who's
progress with
mentoring,
the
the person
times.
who's mentoring in public service, who's
Still
about
using
55,
papers.
Looks at it like, wait.
looks at it like you are too lazy, so they just leave you alone at that point.
It's not
I told you to
laziness.
file papers. you
Okay,
told me,
let-
We need new ideas.
Okay, let me ask you
We need
something.
new ideas.
Yeah.
How do you consume your news? And how do many young people consume news?
On Twitter, a lot. On radio,
Bite size.
I
Ready
yeah,
to go.
but I do read the paper, but I'm not considered
You're an
a
outlier.
youth. Yes, I'm an outlier. But yes, for most young people, it will be social media.
Right.
Yes, and that's why we communicate a lot on
Essentially,
social media.
what you
Why
read
can't we
is-
move there?
Highly ultra summarized versions of what really happens.
It's little bits of information. It's muscles.
Yeah, but
right.
they come back and make the fool.
Eric, no. It doesn't work that way. Not really. Here we are. We discuss news every morning here.
Yes.
We don't just discuss the headline.
Yes.
Too
We
much
discuss
news.
the content. Now, I'm just going by Nerima's argument. It's too much information, Pana. This, can you just sort of like...
Yeah,
Summarize
I'm
it
telling
and
you.
let's
That's
go
what
with
people
it.
will
Make
tell
it
you.
into
It's too
bite
much.
That's it. That's
Yes,
it.
just-
Summarize it and let's go.
Time,
with it.
Can we have this thing in 4 words, please?
Yeah.
And this is an entire article in 4 words.
Yeah.
No. What I'm trying to say is there are changes which I can understand because they are changes. But I cannot say that it is an extremely useful change. You know why? What you miss out on is profound. Because of wanting to introduce what you consider new and better, it is useful in terms of giving you a hint as to what you could understand so that you can be pushed to read more. But as the entity in and of itself,
argument can be
She
had
said no,
back
she
and
said,
arguments have
do
been
all this
had with
extra
this.
for what?
Did you ever think that
Arguments
the
have been
Ministry
had.
of
Let's take a
Health
break.
would be working with Facebook?
Let's take a
But it is.
let's take a quick break. We'll actually this is a
no.
different whole conversation altogether
No.
because our audience on KTN Home will be taking a quick break, so we want to take a quick break. But before we do that, let's talk about this portal by KPA that is an information portal. It's Captain Cargo, kpa.co.ke. .co.ke/Captain KARGO. Seti Muga is importing some PPEs into the country, and this is how we're helping him to understand the process of importing cargo. We had done from the very beginning. He was importing them from China. Steps 1, 2, 3, and 4 got the cargo onto the vessel. Next.
Right. So the shipping agent sends a form. I'm going to call it a form because the acronym is called anyway. It's this form that goes to KPA, and then the shipping agent sends a cargo manifest. So your shipping agent is doing all of these things for you, CT, and then the manifest is approved and it's shared with the transit cargo partner. And then after that, it's distributed to KPA and partner government agencies such as KRA and other people where your costs need to then be paid. So that information comes through very easily. Your cargo's on the way. Not to worry. Ching, ching.
It's coming. 5 minutes to 8 o'clock. We are on Spice FM. This is a Situation Room. It's Kenya's biggest conversation. Taking a quick break. We're in the studio with Nerima Wako Ojiwa, who is the CEO of Siasa Place, talking about youth and their place in leadership. Good morning. So as we come to the conclusion of the hour, Nerima, let's just go back to the question that Ndu asked you. So government has been coming up with initiatives to attract the youth into public service, and some things are working, some are not working. What's not working?
What's not working is the fact that we are also transitioning. Therefore, the fact that we have now technology and understanding that we need to use new forms of documentation, and there's still the filing processes. We also had instances of young people feeling underutilized. You know, the way you can go for an internship and you're just being sent for tea and snacks.
That's what internship
You're not
does.
really learning. You're not learning anything. And so there's also that. And also the fact that there's a lack of understanding what these particular positions, their roles play. Because a lot of times when we think of government, again, we just think of politicians instantly. And so how can we show that there are careers in these spaces too, that young people can also apply toward? And I don't think it's just a Kenya program, a Kenya problem. Also, Ghana had the same issues, but at least there, through Emerging Leaders Foundation, other organizations, they are working and partnering and even looking toward coming here in Kenya. So I think there was also the issues of those who applied and not really knowing the criteria for those who received the internships. So there was a bit of a gap. Some were receiving a stipend every month, some were not. And that seems like an issue in our country, especially when it comes to the stipend that you're supposed to get. How come there are inconsistencies even when we talk about budget? So there was that too. And I think that they are trying to come in with a second phase to find better ways of engaging young people in these processes.
That's a lot to learn from a microwave generation that is coming in, and because you've been sent for cigarettes or tea, you feel like you've been underutilized, and tomorrow you don't want to come back.
Sounds so terrible.
Actually, when
This is exactly
So
what happens in internship. You start from a
terrible.
certain point. If you come in and you expect that tomorrow you're going to be given an entire
That's not
documentation
the
to sign.
expectation.
what is
That's
the
not the
expectation? then?
expectation.
Tell me about the expectation. What do you
I've
expect?
been in an internship before where I have felt included or part of the process, especially when it comes to implementation of programs. Expecting to learn, even if it means being worked to the point where I am being thrown into the ocean to learn how to swim. But here we are. Actually, what we do is think that young people don't know how to do anything, so let's just put them there as a placeholder. And that's unfortunate because there's a lot of
We're going to
talent.
speak to somebody who has actually worked with the youth as well, just like you, and he was a former chairman of the Youth Enterprise Development Fund. Ronnie Osumba will be joining us in the next hour. Good morning. It's 8 o'clock.
All right, let's know what it looks like now. Mombasa Road not looking too terrible from where we are sitting. It's a Wednesday morning, but I think it's looking rather good. A little bit of a hold up then, just between Cabanas and General Motors, but then after that it opens up well onto Mombasa Road and then getting towards the Nyayo Stadium roundabouts and joining Uhuru Highway. You should be fine getting into the CBD. The wait will not be too long. All right, looking at Langata Road, it's kind of slowing down coming then towards the T-Mall roundabout, but then after that you should be okay either joining Uhuru Highway or joining Bagavi Way. Let's look at Thika Road. Today everybody is singing the Yay Yay song because it's not too bad coming off of Thika Road either, getting into the CBD via the Globe Cinema roundabout. Coming out of Westlands also, it's a dream. It looks like everywhere is today. Let us know what you see. Spice FM KE, let's know what traffic looks like in your neck of the woods. And the eastern and southern bypasses, you can remember, are open for business today and not too much drama from where we see it. You see drama? Let us know.
This is The Situation Room, the home of hard-hitting political commentary and penetrating insights about the state of the nation. This is a talk radio experience like no other. The Situation Room, a place for hard truths, debates, and elevated conversations. The Situation Room, witty, political, engaging, deep, controversial.
2.5 minutes
In the
after 8
room,
o'clock.
we
Thank you very
have
much for tuning in to
CT
Spice
Muga.
FM this morning. This is Kenya's biggest conversation. It's the Situation Room. In the room, alongside Eric Latif, Nduoko, and CT Muga, is Nerima Wako Ojiwa. She is the CEO of Siasa Place. And now we're joined by another youthful leader in the country. And this is a former presidential candidate, former chair. Yes, you were on the presidential ballot, boss. So these are the deputy his details. Former deputy presidential candidate, okay. The former chairman of the Youth Enterprise Development Fund and currently the CEO and founder of iGov Africa. This is Ronnie Osumba. Karibu sana.
Thank you, Eric.
And thank you very much for joining us. Welcome to the
Asante sana.
Situation
Good
Room.
to see all of you.
Good to see you. Let's start off with just tell us what is iGov Africa story.
So iGov Africa is an innovation house, basically working with young people who are in the startup space to build tech solutions for public social good. So we've seen a lot of movement in the fintech, e-commerce, logistics space. Kenya is now a hotbed of innovation across the continent. Year on year, we are attracting the highest investor funds in innovation, but none of this is going into public social solutions. So healthcare, agriculture, education. So this is the space we are working in, working as an ecosystem integrator, working with, the likes of DFID, Government of Kenya, etc., to support young innovators.
What is public social solutions? What are they?
They are solutions that address public social problems. So,
And what are public social problems?
so access to healthcare, access to education, for example, providing farmers with extended services, etc.
So what you are in essence saying is that this is something that hasn't been done before.
Not as well as it should be. So working with the ecosystem, we are organizing the ecosystem to ensure that there is full leverage of technology in these spaces. So for example, today, if we had, innovative solutions around delivery of education content to rural areas, we wouldn't be struggling with e-learning across the country. Okay, so, CS Magoha would have had a solution already to get kids back to learning, right? But now we are still so far back. We are still talking about, pushing the entire academic year simply because we cannot be able to leverage technology. If you look at other places in the world, kids are back to learning, right? Why? Using technology.
We're talking about the space of youth in leadership. You have participated widely in political leadership, in engaging the youth as well in various other aspects, like you're saying, in livelihoods, improving their livelihoods by, advancing their own knowledge in technology. Before we went to the top of the hour and taking a look at traffic, we were engaging with Narima because she was talking about, how the youth view things in terms of government. Government is still archaic. You have worked with government as well, Ronnie. You were chairman of the Youth Enterprise Development Fund. Therefore, you worked with government systems. Do you agree with what she's saying? That, government is
a
old?
Dinosaur that cannot be worked with.
Well, government is government. I think government, the way it is structured here in Kenya, anywhere else abroad, is that government is a bureaucratic system. That is just how government is structured. Governments are humongous, and therefore they are less agile to move as we would in private sector or civil society, etc. So by its very nature, government is rigid. So how do you then modernize and make government a bit more agile? And I got a glimpse of your engagement, talking about bringing in more young people so that, there's a bit more energy, dynamism in addressing issues of government. But my own experience is that government has its own pace. There are things that we would like to change in government that by its very design and structure cannot be changed. So yes.
Are we saying that government cannot be faster? Are we saying that we must keep filing?
No, government can be efficient, but there are no shortcuts in government processes. We can make it a bit more efficient, but in terms of the way it is structured, approvals, there's policy that supports approvals, there's legislation that supports policy. It's very difficult to change that form of government unless we all go back and say, let us renegotiate this structure of government.
Most processes of government have already gone through that. They are just at the stage where they need to be implemented. And this is where the issue of speed comes in. The slow speed with which they move. The example I want to give is that of passports. Prior to the Kibaki government, getting a passport was a complete nightmare. Complete. And there was no guarantee you would get it. Somehow, with the Kibaki government, I'm choosing this as an example. The other example that I saw changing in the Kibaki government, not only could you get your passport without knowing anyone, the ease with which you got it. What we now have is an improvement of that system where they even call you or they communicate with you to tell you your passport is ready on this day. That is a change. Same bureaucracy, same system.
Agreed.
But there is logic to it. You even know when you look like me and you have a beard like mine, they even tell you, no, please, don't bother yourself here. Go over there so that you can get better service. And someone even comes to ask you, how can we assist you? Never existed before.
Are youth experiencing the same kind of thing?
No, that's why I giggled. No,
But
not
I think we
really.
need to distinguish between speed and efficiency. Because I think those are two very different things. Obviously, when you are more efficient, then obviously the service
be
is delivered
faster.
faster, right? But there's a distinction, right? We could urge for speed that is not efficient or is not quality. But if we address the issue of efficiency, that's not corona. That's
We hope
saliva.
so.
That's
Thank you
saliva.
for the rider. Because,
But if we then address the issue of efficiency, then efficiency has different components that include the quality of the service you're receiving as well, the cost of the service, the place where you're receiving the service. Okay, so it's not just about, so think about exactly the same scenario you have
Passports.
painted with passports. Think about what Huduma has done. So Huduma has made the service more efficient, right? Some processes are taking just as long. But now you can get it closer to your house. So you don't have to travel farther, right? You don't have to struggle with long lines at Nyayo House or whatever. It is just that the service has been brought closer to you. So now it is more efficient, but perhaps still the same
Takes
period
the
of
time.
time.
So now when we talk about the youth factor here and now trying to have youth involved in this entire process, because we talk about a government that is, you said, discriminatory towards youth, doesn't take into consideration so many things that young people suffer from, as it were. And looking at this, again, dinosaur that is government, this huge process, way of doing things, whether it's quicker, faster, how do you see Nerima youth plugging into this, which we know services may change, things will become more efficient for everybody, not just necessarily youth. How do you see young people then plugging into this?
I think they already are, because even what Ronnie was working on previously with Biashara Fund, we had a meeting. That's the last time I think I saw you, where youth groups had come together and they were concerned with the Women Fund and Youth Fund being merged into the Biashara Bank, I think. And so even last week, young people actually submitted recommendations as to how we can better utilize this policy to reach more young people.
So the agitation worked, not necessarily to have an individual who is young in nature sitting in a position that would make the change.
Yes.
Do you see what I'm saying?
Yes.
So that means that what you would then be looking for is the bubbles to be working amongst the young people as opposed to somebody sitting in a position that would make a change.
And I agree with you there. And that's why I even had mentioned earlier when we were talking, I said it's not necessarily about a person being below the age of 35 representing me. It's just somebody who understands that population being able to sit in that particular position to be able to now articulate these matters when it comes to implementation. That's what matters, because that's an issue that's global. We could say the same for the UK. We could say the same for Germany. It's not that we have young representatives who are presidents to legislators and all that, but there are people who understand their populations.
There are those who've said that the greatest hindrance to any so-called youthful enterprise are the youth themselves.
Ronnie, I mean, from where you've worked in private sector, in government, and looking at the way in which, I mean, we've talked about this, the way in which the present population of youth carry themselves, operate, believe, in terms of how they gobble up information and use this information, are they the biggest hindrance to themselves? Are young people the biggest hindrance to young people in this country?
I think the youth question is a very complex one. And perhaps that is one factor. Are the youth doing enough to, just to dovetail in the little conversation you've had in there about engagement? What does engagement mean? How do they perceive themselves to be engaging with government and participating in decision-making processes? Does it mean running for office? Does it mean sitting in those offices? Or does it mean understanding the processes? So this is where I begin to have problems with young people, that they do not understand the process. So they're clear in their minds, perhaps, what they want, but they don't know how to articulate that, how to fashion that, how to deliver that, and how to follow through that the things they want are being implemented. So I think there needs to be a conversation around how do we empower young people to engage, first and foremost. Secondly, you mentioned a very important point, which is information gathering. How do they gather information? So today, if you talk to young people, they'll say, oh, money is being wasted, there's a lot of corruption. But if you ask them what the procurement process is, for example, procurement process, so even youth enterprise, you say, okay, you want to supply to, I don't know, Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Do you even understand the procurement process? Largely, they don't, right? PFM.
Is it that they don't or they don't want to?
They don't.
No, they just don't.
They don't.
Surely. Who does not want knowledge?
There's access to that information. I mean,
Yes.
for you to understand that procurement process,
You
it means
have-
that you have already
Absolutely.
come into access.
You know, I'm going
into
somewhere with
contact with
this.
this information.
Remember, you've dovetailed well into something we had earlier on when we were talking about how young people access information. Narima clearly told us, tweet,
Facebook.
Facebook.
Short,
Yes,
ready to
short
go.
text. Now,
It's-
is
yeah.
there a
I also
procurement
read
process?
long form in sometimes when it's interesting.
I am actually going by what Narima said. I'm not making this up.
And it's a culture.
Yes.
She said it.
I'm not going by what I think.
This is what Nerima
said.
the
Yeah.
representative of the youth.
I'm quoting her, and I'm asking, is there a can a procurement process
Be in short form.
from
Many, like
so that
20
is a
of them.
tweet?
No.
Or
we,
digitized.
we have to develop a culture of reading, of resource gathering, of dissemination of information. However, that said, back to my original opening statement around innovation for public good, is we also need to appreciate, as government, as media, as civil society, the consumption patterns
Yes.
of young people.
Yes.
And therefore move with the times and say, look, these guys like short texts. Now, is there a way we can build popular versions, digital versions of all this information we need them to consume that we make available to them? When they buy it, then they seek the more detailed information. And I think there are ways you can do that.
And is it necessary then to have individuals? I mean, it would sound like an obvious answer, but maybe it's not so obvious. But would it then be require that you have people of that knowledge and understanding then working in those processes to, number one, suggest? Because the truth of the matter is that anybody who's sitting in the government right now, for example, is not going to be thinking how to make it easier for somebody who wants to come and tender. You're going to need somebody who is of like mind sitting in those positions. Now, is there an appetite to have such people brought on?
Absolutely. I mean, I participated in a task force that was working with, and I think I had Nerima allude to it earlier. Sorry, I was just getting snippets of your conversation. That was working, Ministry of Public Service was working with the World Bank to come up with a young professionals program to attract the kind of talent that we see in private sector into government. Now, obviously, going into government is a maze. You know, I normally tell people, having been there, you know, don't want to be a PS when you're young. Don't want to be a head of department, a CA. Those things are just complex, right? But there are streams within government where, yes, we can bring in young, agile, dynamic people who then change the thinking within, you know, departments, agencies, ministries to have, you know, a youth approach to delivering programs.
I think
right?
this is not just it should not be a suggestion. You're talking about how to communicate from government to the majority of the population. Again, we've got to come back to this point. It's the majority of the population. If the majority of the population consumes information in this way, you've got to find ways of communicating to them in that way.
Yeah.
And there's no way we can say, yes, we are not going to shorten the information that you give on tendering, but you can find better ways of communicating how tendering processes are done.
But Eric,
You can find better ways of advertising tenders instead of always saying that this tender shall be put on a newspaper with the highest national
Gazetted.
circulation and all. Find other ways of advertising your tender.
this enterprise we work for, called the media, has literally been forced to understand what you've just described.
Exactly.
Because information doesn't have to be delivered to you on something that has paper on it. And those who've been slow to understand this have suffered. The digital age has been with us for quite some time. But look at the slow speed now. You know, I'm talking about businesses. Look at the speed with which we have understood the need to change. And we are purveyors of information. So we get information a lot faster and we deal with it on a more regular basis than most people.
Yep.
So if that is our situation, and remember what we talked about, the mentorship influence that young people have. So you have young people in positions, but what is their mindset? The mindset is that of their mentors. So how do you expect to affect change?
So this is why I do what I do, which you were asking earlier.
I do feel.
Is there somebody else doing it? Nobody's doing it. So we're trying to do it. We're trying to go into that space and tell government, look, you have to change your ways. Otherwise, you leave behind a majority of your population. Right? And it's not just the young population. Remember, in the digital age, we now have new inequalities. Sorry. Okay, so rural
Some of them are
populations.
iniquities, my friend.
And some are iniquities. Rural populations have been left far behind in the digital movement.
Right.
Young people are being left behind largely because they can't afford, even if they...
The world doesn't even exist for them.
No, it doesn't.
Yeah.
And women have been left behind. So, I mean, like in Kenya today, only 45% penetration, digital penetration amongst women, almost 70% amongst men. That's a huge disparity.
Yeah.
Huge. And if we do not begin to address it now, we may get, excited in this bubble of digital. What we won't be realizing 10 years from now, we'll be looking back and we'll be saying, where are the women? Where are the rural communities? Where are the youth? We'll have left them behind.
Right. In as much as structures need to change, structures need to adapt to the changing times. Nirima, don't you think that there's an element of discipline also that must be introduced into this conversation, especially when it comes to, which very importantly, how the older generation may see the youth that are operating now?
I don't think that's new, because I think that every generation views their youth as indisciplined, rogue, lack of focus, and lost. And I don't think that's new.
Those are very nice adjectives. I've
had them so often. But what I do think is that when it comes to the discipline, where I see it's a bit of a change is that young people these days apparently talk too much. It's almost seen as a sense. Are you saying this,
or is
I'm saying
from
what,
your belief or what you've heard?
What I've heard.
Oh, okay.
And it's been seen as a sense of disrespect.
Compared to whom exactly?
Talk without action is what you mean, or what?
Yeah, like even the way we joke about how on Kenyans on Twitter, they can be very angry about something, but then when it comes to actionables, no one will show up. And so those sort of comparatives is what is normally linked with how young people behave. And even there are studies that have been done by Aga Khan University in terms of understanding how young people view leadership, or the people who they view as mentors and things like that, which they did in East Africa. And of course, we remember Sonko came up on top. For Tanzania, it was Diamond. So they wonder, what do young people look at when they view an individual that they perhaps admire? And that's changing, because it goes back to your conversation where you had said how we're very centered on materialistic views. And it's about me. But when you grow up, or when you're surrounded by almost complete scarcity, frankly speaking, in December, 2 million young people were considered ghost workers. Not in school, not at work, unemployed. Now when we're talking about this pandemic, within these few months, that number is going to double, of course, into the millions. Again, we're talking about our population being majority young. So what impact does it have? So when you have somebody who doesn't have access to basic needs such as food, how can they not think about eating when they are hungry?
By the way, I don't think we're referring to basic needs here. No, we're talking about things that go beyond basics, but that's not a discussion I want to have. I want to ask, when we talk about the youth, do they even understand the strengths that they have fully?
No.
Do they understand their strong point? Because this is what you leverage. If you want to make change, or you want something to benefit your specific group, you leverage what you are strong in. Do they understand their power?
I have a problem with that statement.
Please have a problem.
Yes, because this is the situation. you cannot know what you're good at unless you've been exposed to it, you've been coached in it, and you've been allowed to thrive in it. Let us allow young people to fail. So let's try them. So for me, it's not a problem with young people perceiving their strength. It's a problem with the system allowing them
Give
to
them the
test
opportunity.
those
now
strengths.
I have a
But you
problem.
see, that's where the strength was coming in.
Yes.
Is the strength for them to take up these opportunities.
Or
They're
to
not
wait.
being given for them.
And to wait, because waiting for the state to do these things, you know how that turns out. You know who's in charge of the state. You know how those in leadership think. The state, to allow them.
It's not in their interest,
Agreed,
basically, to give
agreed.
these opportunities.
But friends, I must disagree with you on this one.
Please
It is
disagree.
the state's responsibility. You cannot shift that responsibility to a majority of the Kenyans.
No, we're not
It is
shifting
the-
it.
It is
it
the
is the
state's
state's
responsibility.
to
Yes.
provide those platforms
Bas.
and to
And to
allow
set a
them.
conducive
It's in the
environment.
Absolutely.
Glad that you've said state, not government. Let's take a break on that note. Let's take a break on that note. In the Situation Room this morning, in addition to Eric Latif, CT Muga, and Nduoko, we have Nerima Waka Ojiwa. She's the CEO of Siasa Place. And we also have Ronnie Osumba. He's the CEO and founder of iGov Africa. This conversation this morning is all about youth's place and position in leadership and governance. Are the youth the leaders of tomorrow? And if they are the leaders of tomorrow, though, so what are tomorrow's leaders doing today? That's the conversation we're having on Situation Room right here on Spice FM and KTN Home. Let's take a break.
All right, let's look at how things might be a little bit different. It's mostly cloudy in Nairobi at 14. Not likely to let up for most parts of the day. We'll see highs of 22 today and a chance of rain later on in the afternoon. Nyeri is mostly cloudy at 14 degrees. It's going to be a wet afternoon there with highs of 20 and lows of 12. Mostly cloudy in Nakuru at 14 degrees. We'll see highs of 21 and lows of 12 with rain later on. Eldoret will experience thunderstorms in the afternoon with highs of 18 and lows of 11. Kisumu will also experience wet conditions, highs of 26 and lows of 18 today. Kakamega will follow in fine form, highs of 23 and lows of 14 with a wet afternoon. Mombasa will be wet this afternoon as well, highs of 29 and lows of 24. Currently mostly sunny conditions though. And in Malindi at 26, it's mostly sunny through the day with highs of 28 and lows of 24. It's partly cloudy in Kampala. At 19 degrees, we'll see highs of 24 and lows of 18. Dar es Salaam at 24 degrees is mostly sunny today with highs of 29 and lows of 22. We'll take a look in Joburg where things are still cooling down at 3 degrees. We'll see highs of 11 and lows of 2. And in Lagos, for now, it's partly cloudy at 24 degrees with highs of 28 and lows of 23. Spot check on Mombasa today in terms of what's going on. A little bit of traffic right around Cabanas is likely to stretch further back at the SGR today, but it's moving. It's not a bumper-to-bumper situation, so not too much to be worried about at the moment. It's slow from Outer Ring and the Donholm flyover. It's bumper-to-bumper, moving very slowly, but it's moving all the same. Let's look into the CBD. Koinange Street is closed, so the NMS has put a huge sign there, so you must find your way around. It's causing a bit of traffic right in the middle of the CBD. If you're approaching or need to use that road, just be aware. Koinange Street closed on both sides, so you're going to have to go round if you're on Kenyatta Avenue, right in the middle of the city. It's not looking too bad on Thika Road. It'll open up as we go along. We're in the middle of traffic hour, so it's understandable what we see. If you get stuck somewhere or find an alternate route that somebody could use, hit us up, Spice FM KE.
On Spice FM, this is the Situation Room, Kenya's biggest conversation, also live streaming on KTN Home, as well as our digital platforms, www.spicefm.co.ke, Spice FM KE on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter. In the Situation Room this morning, my name is Eric Latif. We have CT Muga, Nduoko, Nerima Wakojiwa, and Ronnie Osumba. So, you are disagreeing with something that CT was saying, and this is about youth and their knowledge and their power, and the state's responsibility to give the youth the opportunities that they deserve so they can fail, so they can learn. What is your disagreement again? Okay.
Well, I wouldn't call it a disagreement. It is it's just an additional opinion to the discussion.
Mm-hmm.
If you have a government that you feel doesn't understand what the problems are, then you make them understand these problems. Because if they don't understand the problems, even this role that they're supposed to play, they will misplay it, or they'll do something that is completely useless. But when you think that the government even set up a youth fund, set up a ministry that deals with youth matters, then you have to say, you can't say that this is a government that doesn't understand that the youth issues need to be addressed. So where do we go wrong? Because those steps seem clear, but then something doesn't work because clearly...
I think you've said it. It's in the understanding.
Thank you.
They are doing it, but they're doing it from their understanding.
There's knowing that there's something needs to be done, and then there's doing it properly.
And now this is where the youth come in.
Absolutely,
Take up the mantle, and now...
So the engagement issue I mentioned earlier, that's where engagement comes in. But let's take a step back. And why I was saying, fundamentally, we have a broken system, because there are some very fundamental responsibilities of state. Forget government. Governments come and go. Of state. Because of how you have structured yourself, that there are some fundamental things that come to you as a right.
So irrespective of which government is in place...
Correct. They're there. And this is why I am saying the way we are currently structured, this state, the way it is currently structured is unfriendly to the youth. Perhaps because we have not had a moment. I hear people talk about a constitutional moment. When things need to shift. I think perhaps we've not yet had a youth crisis moment.
And this dovetails straight into what CT was saying. You see, if the youth understood their power, the youth are the majority. The youth are not the future leaders of tomorrow. They are the leaders of today.
Now. Yeah.
Right? If the youth understood that power, then they'd take up. There would be that youth moment.
Agreed.
And then the youth would engage with the government, with the state, and the youth would get what they need from the state.
So there's also, other than just understanding what they need...
You're shaking your head.
And engaging, I go back to, nowadays, me and Mamze, I'm almost chasing Muga here with this white beard. So I push it to Nerima and I have...
You represent wishful thinking.
I'm a wishful, hopeful youth.
Future elder of tomorrow.
Future elder of tomorrow. I think... We have to call out young people in their either disorganization or just lack of knowledge
or resolve
to organize, Because that element of it won't happen. You know, you'll make noise on Twitter. You rightfully called it out. You'll make some noise on Twitter. KOT is vicious. I never wanted to go foul with KOT because they'll kill you. But if that energy could then be organized
channeled
and channeled to very specific things with what we said earlier, understanding, knowledge, and follow through, I think we would be seeing better results.
You know, consider, for instance, if you are dealing with youth matters, where is your largest population of the youth?
Rural.
You know, you whispered it, so...
Rural.
And these programs that you have, you mentioned well, talking to MCAs, etc. And I also asked, when you implement them, I'm sure there are some results. How effective have these things been? There's a reason why I'm asking this. See, each one of us is a product of our bringing in one way or the other. But that's a long period of time. And that's why people comment and say, this person seems to be well brought up. Why do people make such statements? It's because your mannerism represents something that is considered acceptable. Okay? Now, how do you get a group of people who have a mindset that takes them in a certain direction to pause first and then change? You have strengths that they keep relying on. It's the youth who are relied on in any electoral system. It's the youth who are relied on when you're thinking of even work and changing a work system. But this is a strength that is dissipated because the youth have not understood that A, I think it's a strength, and B, they don't know how to harness it. So how do they harness it so that we can say these people are well brought up, meaning they understand what they're doing? We may disagree, but they do understand. Because right now, anyone who is even a youth will say, you know, we're a bit disorganized. How do you change that? Because it can change. Remember, this government, the people who first got into government at independence were all youth.
Thank you. I agree.
So Narima is looking at you like, you know, this sage is speaking. So it's a turn to respond.
In fact, I was going to dovetail into what you said, and then you just picked the words out of my mouth.
Yeah.
That if you look at, you know, the Kibakis, all these people who have run government, in their later years, all started by organizing in their younger years.
But look across the continent. Look across the continent. The names that people will call from today till tomorrow. Kwame Nkrumah, how old was he? You look at people like Sankara. How old was Sankara? You look at people like, they were in their 30s.
How old will Sakaja be when he becomes president, or Ronnie Sumba? They started earlier, in
very
their 30s
early,
and
in their late 20s is when they actually started.
But it's a long runway.
But what it is one of the things that
It's
you
a
spoke
long
about,
runway.
Ronnie,
It's understanding
and
that as well.
it's the resolve.
Yes.
It's understanding, and then it's resolve. It's understanding of, okay, if I'm saying I want to go in and make a change here, it's understanding the processes from beginning to end. Not having complete knowledge, but at least having understanding of every sector or area in which you want to go into and make a change.
Is Siasa
And then
Place
it is a
organizing in
resolve. It is a resolve that anything, call it under the sun, withstanding, that I am committed to making sure that this thing is going to change. Because unfortunately, what it looks like right now, and maybe you can tell me different, is that it'll be hot for some months. It'll be hot for some years. But after some time, that scarcity that you talk about creeps in. These other things creep in and start to kind of change your mental processes. And then your resolve flies out the window. How then can we have staying power if truly this is going to change?
You know, I feel like this conversation, in a sense, has also been simplified because I did mention that there are systemic challenges. And even for you, Ronnie, to talk about the government in itself and its engagement with young people. And what I'm trying to say, we talked about the National Youth Council. We talked about the Duale Bill. So to come here and mention Mwai Kibaki, we can talk about Anyang' Nyong'o, we can talk about Miguna. And, you know, even in their youth, where were they? On campus. And I started by saying, young people cannot do that on campus today. So Kenya is changing.
Why? Why can't young people do that on campus?
The Duale Bill.
What about the dwellers?
They cannot participate in electing their
No,
leaders.
No, they can. It's just changed in how they participate, where they have their class representatives, then a council, which also consists of the administration that now decides who the leadership of the university will be. Not necessarily directly the university student.
It doesn't mean that they cannot engage.
Yeah.
But
Number
it's changed. So we cannot look at the past and expect that change will come like the past.
But
It's changed.
These bills, this is the thing. You can write 1,000 pages on paper, but it doesn't actually stifle the voice of anybody.
It does.
It doesn't,
I
it doesn't
believe
mean
it
that you
does.
can agitate
But
for change.
Nerima,
I believe that
Nerima,
information
this
is
past that you
limited,
speak of-
avenues are limited.
How
Also, the
does this-
challenges
how
that
does
young
this-
people
how does
have
this
are
muzzle the
completely
youth?
different.
How is it muzzling the youth?
I want to protect Nerima because, I'm sure she'll start feeling the pressure of all these questions.
We haven't even started asking the question.
It's fine.
I will agree with Nerima, and I think I said it also at the beginning. The youth issue is a complex issue.
It's very complex.
It's a complex issue, and it's complex in many ways. But one of the things that, Nerima, you have to appreciate, even as youth, as we address these youth issues, is part of the complexity is the changing times. So the strategies of that past that Muga was attacking you about are not necessarily the same strategies you should use
Yeah.
today. In fact, if anything, Nerima, now you have a more powerful tool. Digital, okay, to help you organize, gather information, put your minds together, and if you are resolved, again, the other thing is they push one issue one day on KOT,
And then tomorrow it's something else. Yeah.
They've moved on, so that issue remains hanging, right? Because there's no that staying power and that resolve. But that said, Kibaki was not a student leader. He now I'll support you here. Muga said he discovered his power and talent and leveraged it early. Okay, so this was a guy who was a sharp brain, intelligent, an economist, and he just found his space in that time to get in and influence decisions. I don't know if we all know he was an executive director for KANU.
Yep.
Right at age 29.
Started even earlier. He was actually a lecturer at Makerere.
In Makerere days. Okay, so influencing the thinking. And he didn't need to be a student leader. He didn't need to shout. Of course, President Kibaki, by nature, is a very quiet guy. But he found his space and he said, this is the space I will influence and I will stay in here. I mean, Kibaki would have gone to
Don't
be, I
we
don't
have
know,
But I
examples of
talked
such
about
young
so
people?
many other
We do.
people.
We have examples of such young people as
We
well.
do.
So many other
And I agree.
We do.
Yeah.
And I agree. Absolutely. I've worked with quite a number of young people. I still work with a lot of young people. But the question then is, how do you make this the norm rather than the exception? Because today, the young people who are getting into those spaces and influencing
Are the exception.
are the exception. Are the exception. And many of them, end up then becoming...
They're swallowed by the system.
They are swallowed by the system. Why? Because they do not have the backup.
Yeah.
They do not have the support of all young people. So, Ronnie Osumba is the chairman of Youth Fund. Now, instead of supporting him to help you...
They'll
change
tear you
policy,
down.
They tear you down.
That's true.
Okay, so I think yes, I agree with you. It's a complex issue, but I think as youth leaders, there's need to also appreciate that you're operating in a different time. So the strategies of before may not necessarily work now.
So what would you advise the youth then to do?
Organize.
What is organize?
Which is just
Ronnie,
that.
you
It
were
is
youthful
organize.
a couple of years back
Let me
when
tell
you,
you
when
that-
you were on the presidential ticket.
Absolutely.
You were in that age bracket.
Absolutely. I saw you put in the poster trenches. In fact, a lot of people were excited because the word trenches, right, denotes
It's blood and sweat and gore.
absolutely and tears.
Yes.
All right. And and the question now is, where are the trenches for the young people today? Who is leading that battle? Who is taking these people to those trenches? And so I think it starts with the youth leadership. Those days, well, at least when we were in the trenches, late 90s, early 2000s, when we were pushing for constitutional change, doing all these Katiba forums across the country, you could say, Kepta Umbati, Cyprian Nyamwamu, you could quickly say, who are the youth leaders? Emmanuel Dennis. Today I struggle to think about who the youth leaders are,
Nerima
who have a national appeal. So yes, there's a Nerima here, there's somebody else there, there's somebody else there, but do they have a national appeal?
And
Can
are
they
they
walk
working- are
into
they
a
working
village?
together?
And
In
they,
tandem.
again, are they working together? Can they walk into a village in Kitui and have a voice and have a discussion with the young people? Those days, they could.
You know the problem why I asked,
That's organized.
why I asked about the population, the largest population of youth and where they reside, is because you'll find that even as something as basic as a value system of those who are young and live in town and those who are young and live in the rural areas will be completely different. So Nerima might appeal to people who are in town. But how do we reorganize Nerima so that she appeals to anyone who calls themselves youth?
I think we just ask her to work with the KYMCAs,
We do.
right? So you see, and that's why
We
she
do.
started by saying we have over about 1,000 MCAs around the country who are below 35 years of age. And they recognize themselves, they recognize the place that they are in, and they've come together, they're even organizing, and they also have an association or a forum
Yeah.
of the young MCAs around the country. Those young MCAs from across the country are representing the youth in the villages.
Who is it that they listen to? Each other or a more senior person?
This is what I'm asking. Number two, why is it that when we speak about leadership, we only talk about
Yeah,
politics?
politicians. Yeah. There are many
There
others.
are civil leaders who lead societies and communities. They're not interested in the politics. They just want to organize and resolve issues within their communities. There are business leaders. Today, a lot of young people are leading mid-sized corporations in Kenya. Where are they in this discussion? Because they now have the capital to finance this whole conversation that we're talking about. Religious
Do
leaders.
they have the will to engage?
This is the question.
Because
Have they been
here's the
engaged?
link. The missing link here is that, we've got to get, and that's why you started by saying why you formed Siasa Place and what Siasa Place is all about, is because politics affects our
Every
day.
day.
So for them to impact in terms of policy, of governance, and everything else that will happen, there has to be a political engagement.
Yeah.
And yes, so the other youth leaders who are organizing in communities, who are, successful entrepreneurs in their SMEs, and how do they engage with these people who've gone into politics?
Agreed, and Muga will tell you as you chip in that a lot of the youth leaders of four, no, because he would know because
He's even used Old English of four.
of four of
Even you should have added OVO.
no, because he will know this because I'm sure he grew up with these people, but religious leaders from our mosques and from our churches.
Yep.
And we talk about them in reverence. People who led political agitation.
Are they still influential religious leaders?
Well,
in our
but that's my
communities?
point. Where are the younger
Religious leaders are still influential. They still are very, very influential. The question I want to actually raise is this. The one area that you said you focus on a great deal is what would be called the area of startups. How many Kenyans actually lead startups in this country? How many people are CEOs who are at the forefront of startups? Because this is where you'll engage the youth. People of my ilk will be lost. Completely lost.
You're a minority anyway.
We
You're like about 20,000 of you.
We are, but I thought we were 5. Where did you get the other 15?
That's a percentage.
That's too much. Is that a new discount?
So I'm asking this because if there's a space that the youth have an advantage over, remember I talked about the strengths, and you don't have enough Kenyans occupying that space, you are already at a massive disadvantage. So the push that you're looking for, you see, one, the youth have something called time on their hands. They have time to make mistakes, change, they have time. Something like someone like me doesn't quite have. It's in fairly limited supply. Then they have something called energy. Again, I have it in limited supply. Okay.
If you have it at all.
Even this talking is exhausting me.
Good grief.
And then, man, they have energy. Now, how to channel it?
How do you harness all that, Nerima?
It's a lot, but I do agree with Ronnie in terms of organizing. But also there's this mentality, and I don't know if you've seen it, where there's competition, and the competition is stiff amongst young people because you have been told if you don't strive hard enough, work hard enough, be number one, get all A's, you will not be able to live or survive. So you view everybody else around you as competition and an enemy.
Would it comfort you to know that we were also told the same thing? Work hard.
Yeah.
And when I look at the person telling
Be
me that
number
we should
one,
work
like-
hard,
Are you
and I'm
seeing
thinking,
that as a
working
direct? Are you seeing that as a direct hurdle then to be
To
organized?
organize.
It's
to come
not.
together.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because you'd think that it's that simple to tell people, let's work together,
So what
but
is
it's
it?
not.
What is it? Competition
that
for
easy.
It's
what?
not
what?
supposed to be easy, Nerima. It's not. And I know that, and so I know what she's talking about. I think today we have an extremely competitive culture amongst
Sure.
young people.
Sure.
So it becomes harder to collaborate.
Mr.
because-
Sumba, the competition is not the problem. The individualism is the problem.
Yes, so that's my point. So that it has led them to that individualism. So collaboration has become that much harder. All right. But Nerima, again, I'll go back to my point. The strategies of those days won't work today. So it is you to appreciate, as leaders, as the youth leaders, to appreciate that we're working with very different dynamics. How do we shift the strategies? Maybe you've tried it over the last 5 years. If it's not working, dump it. If it's not working, right? We need things that are working and things that will push. The economic front, and I think this is where Muga was going with this argument for startups and expats. It's a big problem that we need to address. It's also a bit more complex than we imagine it to be, because they say, largely we say money is colorblind, but we know that money sees color, particularly in this startup
it's not colorblind
in this
at
startup
all.
space. It knows colors. It absolutely knows colors and distinguishes between colors. But that's
And it tends to focus on some particular color.
color. But that's a discussion for another day. But I think what Muga is saying is, with shifting times, the strategies could shift. Maybe this, obsession with political leadership is what is shutting, the eye of the potential of young people. Maybe your game is economics. Maybe taking in this space, this startup space, and saying, how do we support young people to build businesses? Think about how the U.S., quite literally today is structured and influences policy. It's enterprise, it's economics. Bill Clinton put it.
capitalism.
It's
Reaganomics.
economics.
But you know, I took you back to education and whether we teach these things and that we should is because there is a lack of belief in our own and in our things and in us. We look at things that are outside our borders and we hold them in higher esteem. We look at people and we hold them in higher esteem rather than our own. We are quick to criticize our own. We are quick to find fault. We should be even quicker to find the things that are good about our people.
And support.
And support it. You see, these numbers are useless if you do not utilize them. The energy is useless if we don't focus it in a direction that is helpful to us. If you are to sit young people, the age group that you mentioned, and look at what they look at on YouTube or whatever, it may be local content, but a lot of it is not local content. And that, so what do you think influences their mind and their thinking?
I find it amusing. Okay, fine, that's the young people, but where did it come from? It's like we're talking about a tree, but then we are not talking about the roots. But we're talking about the fruit.
Where come from?
Like this that
Where
we're
did
talking
the
about.
youth- where did the youth take this from?
How are we
Where did
here?
they learn it from?
Yeah, where are we here? So even as much as we're talking about looking at ourselves, did our parents look at themselves? So what are we instilling? The fact that youth today
you're
do
fortunate
not
here. There's somebody who is not a
understand-
bracket of your parents, and that's myself. Parents can only do what they know and how best they can apply it. Believe me, beyond that, they are also learning just as you are learning.
That's true.
And this thing called parenting, there is no magic formula for it. You keep learning. And this concept of a child, you never stop being a child if that parent is alive. In their mind, you are 80, you're still a child if they're alive.
So, interesting conversations we've had this morning, so we'll be letting Ronnie Osumba leave us shortly. Ronnie, your closing remarks for this.
I think, we are onto something. We are not having enough conversations around youth and youth issues. Perhaps we got to a space where, there was fatigue, youth issues fatigue, right? And so I think it's a good conversation to be having. I'm sure a lot of young people are tuned in, young youth leaders are tuned in. And Nerima, since you're the representation here, I think my challenge to young people is just what we said before. We appreciate that it is a complex game for you. The world is changing rapidly. Of course, COVID has now completely shifted the game even further, but you must organize. So it's organizing and having the staying power and having the willingness to sacrifice a lot of things to be able to, 5-10 years down the line, get to where you want to get to.
But before I let you go, actually, just give us your experience. You tried to organize the youth around a presidential campaign.
Yep.
And your candidature in that 2013 election. What was it that you learned when the youth abandoned you in the final minute?
Oh, God. I think there's a lot of lessons to be learned. And remember, it just didn't start with the presidential campaign. For me, it had been from the Katiba forums. We started in the early 2000s, pushing for this change. We then get this change that we want. And we started pushing the conversation around, you can't change the forest and leave the monkeys inside, right? If you change the forest, change the monkeys also, right? So we said, how do we change these monkeys? So we started shopping, and then 2008 happened, 2007, 2008, and that, of course, completely shifted also the way we view each other as communities. And so we said, at least amongst my people, we said, we have to change the monkeys. And so we jump into this bandwagon and we say, let's build a youthful campaign. And we thrived on social media, on Facebook and Twitter. But just like Nerima said earlier, this energy on Facebook and Twitter rarely converts to action. And so for me, this is, I think, the one thing I took away.
Right.
The big lesson.
The big lesson. And I told you guys, nowadays, I have a Twitter account, but I'm not active on Twitter. Because for me, it showed me the fallacy of social media, that we can have invigorated debate, but at the crux of the moment when we need that energy, it dissipates and it's not there. So
it's directed elsewhere.
It goes elsewhere. So Nerima, I think then, my learnings are, let's not get excited about young people on social media. Let's think about how we convert that energy and channel it to real action on the ground.
So we count those that are actually engaging on the ground.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Ronnie. Asante sana. Before you go, we have some information for you, and this is about KPA, and this is kpa.co.ke/Captain Cargo, KARGO. It's an information portal that you go on to when you get to learn all this about KPA and what KPA is doing. So, for example, on the import process, today we are helping cities simulate importation of some PPEs from, not the Jack Ma Foundation, but from China. And they are coming into the country, and he'll be selling them in this market. So far, we have looked at the process.
Emphasize selling. They're not donations.
They're not donations.
No, he said no, it's his business cash cow, man.
For selling.
We're not playing here.
Steps.
Right, so we've gotten to the point whereby all government agencies have your documentation, right, CT, and your stuff is on the vessel, it's on the way here, and now your agent obtains a manifest number from the shipping agent and lodges the entry with KRA or other partner authorities. Let's just call it KRA, all right, for transit cargo. And then they pass the entry has been passed because your good PPEs is a good thing now, COVID times, we understand, right? And they pay the duty which you provide, of course, to the respective revenue authority, which again, in this case is KRA. So the CNF agent, which is your agent, now surrenders the bills to the shipping agent, and the shipping agent sends the delivery to KPA. So now they're waiting for your stuff to dock, and then they can offload it.
Keep it right here.
Let me just add, there are no free samples.
City's
sorry.
goods will be arriving shortly. Thank you very much for joining us on KTN Home. This is the Situation Room. We know that you're going back into your regular programming. Join us again tomorrow, KTN Home, from 7 to 9. In the Situation Room on Spice FM, we've been having C.T. Muga, Nduoko, Eric Latif, Ronnie Osumba, and Nerima Wakoju. And Nerima stays on because she's our guest host for today. And Ronnie lives and goes. So, Ronnie, before you go, you will be told today's proverb by C.T. Muga.
Today's proverb, I have to read it actually.
So get the book.
Do not worry. This is good enough. My eyesight is not.
You're far from the mic.
Well, here. Am I still far from the mic?
No, that's better.
Okay. Do a good deed and throw it into the sea. Do a good deed and throw it into the sea.
Umeelewa hiyo?
Tenda mema,
Oh, wow.
enda zako.
All
Very good.
right. Okay.
So that's a good summary.
Very good summary.
Very good.
In fact,
Congratulations.
if you want people in your neck of the woods to understand it, tenda mema, kwenda huko.
Well done.
Well done. Well done. Thank you very much, KTN Home. Keep it right here on Spice FM 94.4 in Nairobi. We're also in Mombasa on 87.9, 102.5 in Kisumu, 96.0 Nakuru, 96.7 in Eldoret, and Nyeri, and Malindi as well. 97.7 in Malindi. And we live stream the show every day on social media platforms, Spice FM KE on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter, as well as www.spicefm.co.ke.
Thika Road is bumper to bumper. That has opened up to some crazy traffic this morning. We should also know that demolitions are going on at Gikomba Market. That has affected traffic on Gong Road, and it has also affected traffic in the little roads in between there. And that's probably something that we need to keep a lookout for. Langata Road is a parking lot, unfortunately. That was just a little traffic about half an hour ago, but now it's bumper to bumper all the way to the T Mall roundabout, and then joining Bagathi Way, or then going towards Uhuru Highway, coming off of Thika Road into the CBD, slowly, but you'll get there eventually. Outer Ring around the Donholm flyover, good morning is what you're being told. It's very, very slow, but it'll open up soon enough. Mombasa Road is also moving slowly, but we expect it right now. Traffic hour will end in about in about half hour or so. So we'll take a look at what it looks like later. But for now, it shouldn't be too terrible for you. Spice FM KE, tell us what you see.
This is the Situation Room, the home of hard-hitting political commentary and penetrating insights about the state of the nation. This is a talk radio experience like no other. The Situation Room, a place for hard truths, debates, and elevated conversations. The Situation Room, witty, political, engaging, deep, controversial.
2.5 minutes after
we
9
have
o'clock.
C.T. Muga, research.
We continue the conversation with Nerima Wako Ojira. She is the CEO of Siasa Place. And Siasa Place is an organization that organizes the youth. All right. What else does it do? Just a recap of what Siasa Place does.
So we are an NGO, and we educate youth on the constitution, political processes, governance processes, electoral processes as well, but mainly inclusion of youth in processes. That's what we do.
Mm-hmm. And so we were talking about, youth, youth place in leadership, youth place in governance. You hear the conversation that we're talking. It's like we're throwing the challenge back at you.
Yeah,
and saying,
always happens.
Youth, come on. Let's see how we can engage. But then, what kind of support would you require from the minority?
I believe in terms of even information, there's that aspect of understanding the history of Kenya. And I don't feel that we have that enough. And it doesn't have to be in the form of books or text. It can be even in music, storytelling, art. There's just different ways that I feel as a country we can be able to understand the history of our country. So when we know where we are from, we know where we're going. Because even when we're talking about things like Vision 2030, the fact that we have about 10 years to go to it, a lot of youth do not know about it. And it's not to say that they are not curious to know about it. They absolutely are. But where to get this information is not that accessible. It's not as accessible as we make it to believe. And even when we talk about young people taking up their positioning and things like that, to what? To what? Because I cannot ignore the fact that the economy is terrible right now.
Where would the youth like to take their position?
Where?
Yes, where? You said where to, because it means that what they would like, they can't get to. So where would they like to take positions in? Which part of the economy?
Just a decent living, honestly.
No.
Because
Let me ask the question again. Huh? For youth to be included, what would they like to be included in, and how would they like to be included?
decision making, in terms of even how budgets are spent within a county, they are not included in that. If we talk about public participation, majority of participants are not young people.
Why?
If it's really public participation,
exclusion,
then it isn't public
Who
participation.
is excluding
But
the
it's
youth
still
from
being
participating in
passed.
the public participation forum?
Even the way the meetings are organized in terms of inviting, I want to say that the
But you don't need to be invited for a public participation meeting.
Well, you need to be aware that it's happening.
Yes, we
Yes,
don't know it's
aware,
happening.
yes, but not invited.
Okay,
You
so
see,
they are
invited,
not aware.
you're making it exclusivist.
They are also invited, by
this-
the way. They're invited.
So
and
what
they're
we are
not
saying,
aware.
what we are saying here is that the structures that were set up for public participation have failed, because the structures for public participation should include electronic means,
Yeah, they
right?
they say that they
and
do.
have wider information sharing.
Yeah, and I
if
tried
we,
to.
if we were basically to say that a county has or a government has done proper public participation awareness creation, it should have used all available means, many of which would have gone to this majority of the population, to know that there is a public participation forum that's been organized, and this is the agenda, and this is the mode of engagement that we expected to have. So already, we're basically talking about the failure of a system, but not a failure of the youth to participate and engage. There's still an opportunity for them to know that this has happened, and how do we engage?
But Eric, even that, if you say some are invited, what stops them from propagating this invitation? Or is it that we're saying that those who call for this meeting limit the number of people who must attend?
Yep.
Sometimes they do, yes.
Then it isn't public participation.
Because they want to control the narrative and
Then
the outcome.
it isn't public participation.
Let's hear
That's
from
what's
Tony, who's
happening.
calling in from Mombasa. Good morning, Tony.
Morning, how are you?
We're well, thank you. How are you?
I'm fine and a bit frustrated.
Why are you frustrated, Tony?
Wacha nisaidie madam hapo kidogo. The problem is, the youth, we have, as much as City said, we have extra energy. You see? But the thing is, we are not involved. In what way? For example, if we want to say there's public participation, there will be a forum that will be organized, let's say, in a particular ward, and go to a hall or something. There is where your views will be taken. But where are the youth right now? If you want to get in touch with the youth, they're in the social media platforms. Yes. So the trick is, if you don't want to get them involved, just put the notice in the newspaper that on a particular date, a certain ward will have a meeting and we are going to discuss about the budget, whatever you want. But you avoid the areas where the youth are.
But Tony,
today, right now, yes.
So let's talk about, for example, we've just established that the majority of county assemblies
Yes.
are actually, those positions are held by the youth.
Yes.
So we have the youth in these assemblies, and they know that this is what is expected to happen in public participation. What is it
Yes.
that these youth are doing to ensure that it happens the right way?
Okay. Let's say, for example, right now, you can see that if there's a problem in Mombasa, already there's a forum that has been set up in Facebook that addresses issues that are happening in Mombasa. The other day, Mohammed Ali was bringing up the issue about the port. What did he do? Went to social media. And what happened? He got so much support. But
on
if I'm
social
a current
media.
MCA, yes, but there is where people are and people make comments. And people actually were now made aware that, by the way, these things that he is asking about, he's bringing out, they are not just politics, they are facts. Now, if I am an MCA currently, I know the way people reacted on such an issue, and the youth were very fast to comment and they wanted to participate so much. I'll avoid social media. What I'll do, I'll just put a poster at the chief's office and say that we are going to have a meeting on Wednesday at 10 a.m. As you can see with that is so strategic that
it's already
you have
excluded the youth.
That is what is happening even today.
Okay.
Even when you see the BBI, when they are going out around the country, where were they advertised? So
other
our
forums.
problem is
We get
yes,
you. We get you, Tony. I think we hear you. Let me take this caller from Nakuru. Karaoke in Wakulima Market. Karaoke, how have you been?
I'm well, my friend.
Very good.
How are you?
We are well.
Good morning.
Well, I would like to contribute on public participation. I've been in public participation here in Nakuru. And let me tell you, City Muga, because I think you can understand what I'm saying. When I went there to participate in public participation, after it has been announced 3 or 4 days ago, what I met there is very unbecoming, in fact, because I found MPA and a member of parliament of this area, in fact, talking to those people who will participate in that public participation, despite the fact that the hall is full, but there are those people who are already chosen just to support what the agenda that they want, in a way such that a person like me, even if I'm going to lift my hand, the chairman of that public participation is controlled by the MCA.
So it's a choreographed meeting.
Yeah, of course. By telling him which people are supposed to be given the chance to talk. Do you understand me? I think public participation is just a mere, I don't know what I can call it, but I don't think it is supposed to be like that. I think, to me, my public participation should be in an open space, not in a public hall. Because in open space, I think people will not be aware, or even those who are holding that meeting will not be aware of what kind of question these people will ask us.
Thank you, Karaoke. Let's take this one from Langata. Raymond in Langata, good morning.
Eric, first I think the issue of public participation is just formality. Because first I think even youth in this country are not even taken serious. Because, for example, let's say, BBI, we had several groups presenting their views, others saying that, for example, there's been this, for example, women presented saying that they want one of the position of deputy prime minister to be a woman. But why not also say that one of the deputy prime ministers also should be a youth, because of course she's the majority in this country. And also we have an organization called National Youth Council. Actually, this organization is supposed to be fighting for the youth. But what have they been doing? They've just been following government officials to hotels, having tea with the people. Instead of them fighting for the youth, actually, you're supposed to have a ministry of youth in this country, because we are the majority. You're not supposed to be having just a department and a ministry of ICT, and then yet we're the majority in this country.
Okay.
It's clear that youth in this country are not taken serious, and we are not. The youth are not being taken very seriously. And I'm disappointed.
Thank you, Raymond. Let's take some of the comments that's also coming on social media. I can see this one from Sah Shuja, calling himself president. We do understand our power. I think he's responding to you, CT, and says, however, our support system, basically the environment around us, inhibits us from growth and maturity into a space where the former youth occupy. It seems that they have forgotten that they were once the youth, and our leaders and youth leaders too have misrepresented us.
You know, I am of a completely different school of thought.
Which one?
You see, if you want to achieve something, there will always be some form of hindrance. Especially if it's something of value or of worth, don't assume it will be easy peasy. Don't. There will be a struggle for you to actually get there. Anything in life, think about it, whether it's going to school, excelling, or whatever you want to think of. There is a patch that is never easy. It becomes easy when you get accustomed to it. Now, if there is, as I'm hearing, this feeling that certain things must be given to the youth, yes, indeed, it is the duty of the government to ensure that the interests of the youth are taken care of. But let me tell you, if you don't take care of your own interest first and ensure that you promote that interest so that people are aware of what that interest is, rest assured that you'll be left behind.
There's got to be a contributory factor that is played even when people start taking you seriously. You can't sit there and say, take me seriously.
You will not be taken seriously.
In fact, all the more reason why anybody will not take you seriously. There has to be some kind of contribution that you make. There has to be at least louder levels of your voice that must be heard. There must be agitation that you will make room for people to actually sit up and say, okay, something actually is happening here. Can we also join to push and make sure that something is done? But for us to sit in a corner and say, actually, you know what? Number one, I am the majority. Number two, it then behoves you to do something about it. So take me seriously. Unfortunately, it just doesn't happen like that. For anybody who's made any kind of a dent in society, anywhere, there was at some point where they stood up and pushed against the status quo, pushed against the grain, and that is how people sat up and said, okay, hold on, there's something going on here. But sit in a corner and expect people to take it seriously.
I should ask a more direct question. There are two youthful leaders who come to mind. There's one called Babu Owino, there's one called Sakaja. Do you think if either of them were actually president by some miracle, that all these youth issues would be mitigated?
No.
I want to talk about what Sakaja pushed in terms of the National Employment Authority. And that was something that he was working on when he was nominated before he became senator. And it was focusing on employment.
Yeah.
Right now, they are currently amending that particular bill. And what they are working on is removing or deleting youth that exists in that document. So we go back to what I was talking about initially. It's not that young people are just sitting and doing nothing. It might be a large number, but they are
So how
young
can
people
young
who are
people
working.
safeguard those provisions in that law so that they still
Okay, let's
stay
talk
in law?
about the public
We'll
participation.
do that when we come out of a break. But before we go to the break, I want to hear from Daniel, who's calling and has been on hold from Kisumu. Good morning, Daniel.
Good morning, Eric and Titi and the team.
We are well.
We are well, thank you.
Yes. In fact, to add on whatever is going on or whatever is being discussed, is that we've seen in many cases that youth are being neglected. And you can see even public participation, the way it's being conducted, these guys are always informing others. But information doesn't reach youth accurately. There are sometimes that maybe youth can want even to bid in tenders, but these tenders are just going to the people that deserve. And if you check all those procurements that are always being...
We've lost him. You can call back, Daniel, so we can hear what you wanted to say. This is a situation room. It's Kenya's biggest conversation. We're taking a quick break. Take a look at weather. In the studio this morning is our guest host, Nerima Wako Ojiwa. She is the CEO of Siasa Place. And we are discussing the place of youth in leadership. If the youth are the leaders of tomorrow, what are tomorrow's leaders doing today? That's a question we were asking. 19 minutes after 9. Good morning.
Mostly cloudy in Nairobi. We'll see highs of 22 and lows of 12 today. Let's take a peek then into Nyeri, where at 15 degrees, mostly cloudy conditions. Rain afternoon, highs of 21 and lows of 13. We'll see highs of 21 and lows of 12 in Nakuru with rains in the afternoon. Currently, mostly cloudy conditions at 16 degrees and 14 degrees in Eldoret. Mostly cloudy, thunderstorms in the afternoon with highs of 18 and lows of 11. The rains have started coming down in Kisumu at 20 degrees. They'll continue for most parts of the day with highs of 26 and lows of 18. It's mostly cloudy in Kakamega at 18 degrees. We'll see highs of 23 with showers in the afternoon coming down to a low of 14. 26 degrees and mostly cloudy, or mostly sunny, I beg your pardon, in Mombasa. We'll see highs of 29 with rain showers later and lows of 24. 27 degrees and mostly cloudy, mostly sunny in Malindi. That'll change later to mostly cloudy conditions, highs of 29 and lows of 24. Out of Kenya, 21 degrees. It's warming up in Kampala and partly cloudy conditions. It'll cool down later with thunderstorms with highs of 24 and lows of 18. Dar es Salaam is mostly sunny at 26 degrees. We'll see foggy conditions later with highs of 29 and lows of 21. It's 3 degrees and mostly sunny conditions to prevail in Joburg, highs of 11 and lows of -2 today. In Lagos, it's partly cloudy at 24 degrees, highs of 28 and lows of 23 with rainy conditions in the afternoon. Let's take a wrap around Europe, where at 16 degrees, London is mostly cloudy conditions to ensue, highs of 21 and lows of 13. And in Paris at 18 degrees, it's warming up. Clear skies this morning, cloudy conditions later with highs of 23 and lows of 16. Around about 2 a.m. in New York at 24 degrees, and it'll warm up to a high of 31 and lows of 22.
Heated conversation continues right here on Spice FM. Situation, the biggest conversation in the room is CT Muga, Nduoko, Eric Lati, and Nerima Wako Oyu. You were about to respond to something.
Classic soul, R&B, smooth jazz, neo soul, and nostalgic ballads.
Doing absolutely nothing. And I was giving the example of Sakaja with the National Employment Authority. Initially, the concept was to create some form of an institution or a department that would focus mainly on employment of young people because of the youth bulge.
Yep.
But now, currently, that bill is going through amendments. And one of the things that they're looking at, in fact, the major thing, is removing the focus on young people. But I also want to talk about public participation. The Senate held a second hearing on amendments to public participation, the bill. And we did, as youth groups, organize around it, and we did give recommendations as to how we feel that young people should be communicated to, better ways to share that information, and how they can interact with them. Whether that's going to be utilized or not, we're yet to find out. What I'm saying is, it's not that young people are just sitting and expecting to be included. They are different pockets of individuals who are working around that. But there are also systemic obstacles which are very, very focused on youth. Someone called and talked about the National Youth Council not doing anything. Frankly, how can that department do anything when they're underfunded? When they are understaffed, they do not have a constitutional board. If we were to look at it as a state organ, we would say that it shouldn't be functioning. If anything, it should be scrapped.
So it's deliberately just been watered down.
Yes.
To be ineffective.
Yes, and that's the National Youth Council. Here we are talking about a youth ministry. Do you know there's the Department of Youth Affairs? Now we've been moved to the ICT. And a lot of times, even when you ask a young person who represents you in meetings, government meetings alone, there's the Office of the President, the Deputy President, the Youth Ministry, Department of Youth, Interior as well. What I'm trying to say is, even in the aspect of organizing, there is so much protocol as to who's actually in charge of the youth in that level, the executive level.
Must it be one person in charge of the youth? Must it be one person speaking about the youth? I mean, like you said, youth are in every sphere of the society. If we talk about interior and the office of the president, you have a senior manager, a senior director in charge of youth affairs, and this is Walter Mongari. And then you go into the other departments as well, and you'll find all these people. Isn't it a good thing?
No, it's not a good thing because it also brings disorganization.
Whenever there's conversations around issues happening in the ministry in the office of the president, there's somebody who's sitting there who understands the plight of the youth and who represents the...
It's only a good thing if they work well together. When there is no synergy, communication, or effort that is brought toward one specific need or issue, which is young people, then we have a problem. That's not how they work. It's absolutely not.
You know what I'm hearing is that a lot of the things that the youth from your conversation are pushing for, there's only a certain level of push. Now, the reason why the youth will keep getting left behind is because these same things other people fight for. And they fight. They don't push, they fight for it. The space that women occupy, they didn't just find themselves. They've been fighting for this space, fighting, literally. And fighting means there are people who spearhead it, who are constantly at it, and galvanize others who support them. Now, apart from your organization, tell me about this youth setup, which are constantly fighting. And I mean, they're in the face of the government, they're in the face of the community, and you can be said they're spearheading. And they are known throughout the nation. Now, if that doesn't happen, the interest of the youth, as you call it, will be just one of the many issues that the country is dealing with, and it will not be a priority.
I see something that could be part of the problem there, CT. Just the example that you've given. The women and the women campaigners have fought over this over many years.
Yes, they have
Some of them
fought.
over a decade and before, and beyond, right? It's because they don't stop being women.
Yes.
They are women 10 years ago, they are women
They'll
today.
still be.
The youth of 10 years ago will not be youth today. We've just had one year. Ronnie Osumba, who's now talking about, having left that behind and it's now the other youth to take over. So the youth movement has leaders who Nerima will outgrow this demographic.
But she'll have laid down a platform on which other people can work.
I'm actually heading to a point where we ask people like Nerima, do not stop. It doesn't mean that because you have now gone beyond 35,
you stop
becoming a youth. You continue agitating for the youth.
Or stop pushing for youth a particular agenda because it shouldn't stop. It shouldn't ever stop. And if just go back to why do you think? If we're looking at now at legislation, why do you think that then the youth agenda then is being watered down or youth issues are being then removed? Why do you think that is?
I believe it's a threat, if anything. If the National Youth Council was to work well, where the majority population are actually electing their representatives, that's a mini government.
You haven't answered the question that Ndu asked you.
Why do you think they're removing youth?
Because we are a threat. It's in the process of making young people powerless.
Have you considered
because we are a threat?
Have you considered that because you're easy to remove?
No, it's because we are a threat.
No, not really. You see, if you were a force to reckon with, one would be very hesitant to remove anything that pertains to you. If you are not considered a threat or a force, then you are disregarded. It's the way this thing works. For the longest time, why do you think the issue of a girl child became an issue to the fore? It's because girl children were neglected. The pendulum has swung to the other side and the boy child is now being neglected. But the point I'm trying to make is this. An issue has to be made of it. A serious issue has to be made of it.
So it starts from what she's saying, that the youth are considered a threat and they are also considered the easy one to pick.
I'm trying to say that they are not really considered a threat.
So why are they being removed?
I don't think they're even being removed. You see, if there is something to do with employment, a bill that you want to pass, one could even ask, Kwani, is it only the youth who need employment? You see? Should it not be a national issue? That is the argument that they will use. So if the youth want to be...
But why is that becoming a conversation now?
Yes.
When this bill was going through all the stages of becoming law, that was never a conversation.
But Eric...
what concern is this that's being addressed that necessitates amending a bill and removing the word youth? What concern has emerged here that shows that, because we had the name youth, therefore we've
got to change this now.
We have seen that we have really left a huge part of the population and not addressed. What concern is being addressed by removing the word youth?
I would take it even further than that, and I would say that those who feel that this bill would favor them the most, it's incumbent upon them to ensure that these matters are taken seriously and that particular clause is not removed.
That's what we're working on, youth-serving organizations. That's a coalition we have right now. And what you're talking about in terms of other entities pushing, those are the ones that exist because it consists of 15 youth-serving organizations. It's the beginning.
Let me take my discussion further. Engage some of the other people who may not necessarily be youthful to support your cause. Then you really become powerful. One doesn't have to be youthful in order to fight for a youth cause. I don't have to be female to fight for a cause that supports women.
But I'm interested in understanding exactly why. What is driving all this? Why is there such a concerted effort to muzzle the voice of the youth or participation of the youth? Why is there such a concerted effort?
You're on my theory.
And it's so direct, yeah.
You're on my theory. Yeah. My theory is really very simple. It's something that anyone who's in government has put into practice for the longest time and they understand it. It's this. If you know that there is a powerful group of individuals, you disenfranchise them. There are governments on this continent that have done precisely. There are governments in the Western world who've done precisely that. You make sure that, for instance, economically, you disable them. Then they don't really have a voice.
And then they become heavily dependent on you.
You, yes. They are more concerned about day-to-day existence, so they're not going to worry about these many other things.
And it becomes too complicated to even start to dabble in those issues.
No. Those are esoteric issues. You don't even want to touch them. If you leave the youth to just sort of like dwell in the quagmire of just the day-to-day issues and hustle, they are not going to think of the bigger issues. My theory.
So they'll never engage.
I believe that theory.
Let's discuss that further at 28 minutes to 10. Let's take a look at traffic.
All right, on Uhuru Highway, inbound from Mombasa Road today, crawling along very, very slowly today, getting into the CBD. It is actually crazy. We should have been done with traffic off by now, but apparently that is not going on. There's a traffic jam along Thika Road as well, just past Muthaiga to town, but it's moving, both using the service lane and the highway today. There's construction going on right around Kasarani Mwiki Road there. We don't know exactly what is being built, but that's slowing down traffic today as well. So those are the hot spots that we see. Coming off of Thika Road as well, Ngara going towards Utali inbound for some reason. On Thika Road, still, it's a standstill on Langata Road at the Wilson Airport, and that is slowing everything down. So where we saw that things should have let up by now, it's when everything now is slowing down. So patience is what is required today, and we'll see how that opens up as the minutes tick by.
Minutes to 10. This is the situation. And the conversation continues. We are talking about youth. And City, you came up with that theory, your theory, and which Nerima says you agree with, that this is about disenfranchising this huge population so that they forever are dependent on you.
And they forever followers, and they more or less pander to your dictates. It's not a new tool. Colonialists have used it.
Yep.
Governments have used it. It's something that is used all the time. And people understand, because the sort of power, for instance, in the political world that our politicians like to wield, they don't encourage competition or any mention or any inkling or anything that points in that direction. And they would understand the power of the youth. You know why? They utilize it for their own benefit all the time. They would really understand it. And they would know what such a group would be and could be if they were genuinely organized and were moving as one. They would understand it perfectly.
So if we were to push this argument to its end,
logical,
the logical conclusion, then what we'll be saying is that there's also then tokenism, because there's a lot of appointments of youth into government. You'll be saying that this is just tokenism and picking of apologies, that people who never come and topple the apple cart, never come and speak out against it.
Even if they speak, what is this thing?
What is it going to do? But I think having an awareness of this very situation is extremely critical. Knowing, number one, knowing the power to be harnessed amongst a group of people like this, because it's a huge group. Like we've talked about the numbers already. Number two, awareness of what others outside of this group regard this group as. And threat could be used, but they realize the power that is existent in this group. It beckons this group also to realize the power that they have. And I think that is very important. Once you know what it is that you have, then you know really how far you would be able to go. And that is the fuel and fodder that you need to then start to entrench and agitate for some of the things that you hope to see change in the country. That's the fuel that I see it as. I don't see it as anything else, because we can shout from here until tomorrow, and Twitter, they talked about it. You can shout from here until tomorrow. It's not going to do anything. But to realize the potential that you actually have, because of the fact that, one, there's so many.
Not just realize, internalize it.
Yeah, and then put it, and then use it for something. And then use it for something. I see that going so much further than where we are right now. I see it going to the place whereby, yes, you will be able to rally around individuals in different pockets of different sectors. I see that you'll be able to then stand around somebody how often say, as opposed to looking at the situation as it dire now, look at the potential that a situation has to create. Look at what it could be. And I'm telling you, the could be, there's something sensationalist about the could be that would rally people with the power that they have now to then move towards that. And that's what I see it as. if you yourself can't see what other people can see in you that they would rather stifle you, then there's a problem.
More to the point, remember when I said a support system, I'm going to repeat this. This is a message that should be spread to other people, not necessarily the youth, yes, but others who could support your cause, because it makes you more powerful. You mentioned something about the university and how the so-called electoral system and the university student movement was stifled. You're probably very right. If you understand the history of the student movement, if I may call it that, in our universities, there's a time in this country, in the 80s and 90s, the university students were like the official opposition in the country. They're the ones who pointed out things loudly and said this. Now, any smart person would realize that this is a force you want to contain because public universities have increased. Before it was just Nairobi. So if you shut it down, that's the end of that university story. Right now, they are all over the country. And can you imagine the voice? Now, these are youth. Can you imagine the voice of these people if they wanted to make a movement in a certain direction? It will be felt.
I agree.
What am I saying? I am saying the youth should focus on the things that are youth, but they should also look at friendly sources that can support their cause.
You know, there are very many people, and I think, Ndu, you can just look at social media. This conversation has attracted a lot of debate as well. There are people who feel that there's a lot of misunderstanding of the plight of the youth. There are those that agree with what Nerima is saying, there are those that disagree as well with what Nerima is saying. Just sample some of them as we continue with this conversation.
Wende Kisilu says, not all youth are shallow. Quite a number of us appreciate depth and progressive content. The system is designed in such a way to keep the youth at bay. A large number of youth are highly educated and unemployed. This is deliberate in order to use youth as puppets. Youth are being restricted. Some of those opportunities are part of the long run, and that's according to Anthony. According to David, majority don't know and therefore they can't use what they are unaware of. Jackson says, we youth have not shown the sacrifice and resilience needed that is worth being recognized. We begin a show and before we know it, we are bailed out by bribes, handouts, threats, and even tire due to poverty. Ignatius says it's much easier for any youth-related information from rural city mobilization. The elite youth in Nairobi at times may not understand the very issues down in rural areas. I believe issues of the city youth are somehow different from those of the youth from my village. What needs to be done is to have a comprehensive strategy to harmonize these issues, come up with a way to face and handle them. If it begins from Bungoma to Nairobi, it shall be bigger than beginning from Nairobi to Bungoma. I'm willing as a person to team up with youth with the same mind and at least do something. Let's just not talk. Let's walk the talk. Some samples there.
Basically, like he's saying, it should be from bottom up.
Yeah.
Because he believes that if it began from Bungoma to Nairobi, it would be different from Nairobi to Bungoma.
Right.
The people of Bungoma would look at it differently. Like, oh, these are Nairobi people just coming to tell us what they think we should do, as opposed to the people of Bungoma coming and deciding this is what we want and this is how we engage. How do we fight all these barriers? You spoke about one key barrier here and you said there's a lot of fierce competition amongst the youth and amongst the youth leaders, just harnessing and harmonizing their own thoughts into one. Let's speak with one voice seems to be an oxymoron for the youth.
We do work with youth in different counties. As a matter of fact, we hardly work in Nairobi. We're just based in Nairobi. And I think what's important is when we engage young people, which is mainly through youth groups, and we do not necessarily engage women and young men together at the same time, because we've also found that gives different output too. And we found that when you talk about the issues that they have within their communities and then associating that to what can we do about it and educating them on how they can do it. Because we'll find that something even as simple as writing a letter, frankly, in rural areas, that's something that they cannot do. So we support them from here, but then as a representative.
but they're the ones who go meet with these MCAs or CECs on these particular matters and issues. But it still goes back to this information. They are unaware. It's limited. But once they learn that these avenues exist, we do see an impact of them wanting to be involved. In fact, many of them are thinking of vying for political positions. And we even have some who are influential leaders when it comes to business, agriculture in their communities, and choosing to participate. So that means we've seen like public participation, what we're talking about, the fact that they come up so haphazardly. Young people coordinating to where they say this one person will participate and use WhatsApp to discuss what's happening in the meeting. So gather feedback and be the sounding board of a group of young people. These are new mechanisms that were not being used initially. So as much as we're even talking about a notice board, same thing. Someone knowing that that notice board, this announcement has come about, I will attend and I will share this information. You would think that that's something that is logical, or you might say common sense, but not so much. And so teaching young people that this is how we need to organize, and the community is better when we all work together. We cannot do this separately and looking at our individual families. And one thing that we normally say is, youth, yes, you're very ambitious. I want to start my own business. Fine, great. But if you have a government that is not accountable, your business will struggle. It will struggle. Even just starting a business is difficult. The environment is not conducive. And so them learning these processes and the individuals that they elect. MCAs is one of the highest turnovers. MCAs who do not perform well, who are not present in the community, will not be re-elected. They will not be. So we are seeing some change, where people want to see their leaders present in their communities, representing them and their issues. And once that person is not, people know not to bring them back in. So I wouldn't be so hopeless about it.
Indeed. Let's take another quick break in this conversation. Let's talk about the KPA. We've been helping City import what? Again?
PPEs. City PPEs on the way.
I need to repeat. They are not donations. And there are no free samples.
You're selling.
No, carry on.
So you're selling. You're bringing them.
Selling for profit. Yes.
Okay. So we're at the point whereby, according to the portal, Captain Cargo says, now, so where we are, the last 4 steps is that KRA, or Partner State Revenue Authority, so in this case, KRA, is going to verify your cargo, right? And issues a release order, which is received electronically by KPA. And then your agent submits a pickup order to KPA and pays the port charges, which we've already provided for. Now, the truck has arrived. Yesterday we looked at berths and wharfs and things like that. But now the truck arrives at the port entry gate and you're issued with a position slip by KPA. The truck proceeds to the yard and is loaded with your precious PPEs, and thereafter a gate pass is issued to exit the port. So what this portal is doing is that it's giving you all this information in terms of what exactly is supposed to happen. So it's quite unlikely that what would happen on the ground would be different from what is happening here on the portal. Your PPEs are here, ready for sale, and you're smiling all the way
Like
to
they've
the
just
bank.
arrived, just like that.
Like that.
Seamless.
That's
Telling you.
Now, City, because we know you.
We need a couple.
I acknowledge. I also know you.
Just give us a couple. We will market them for you. You know when I'm wearing it like this.
And a couple is
and
how
then
many?
Nerima, now posts on her social media. People will see. And
Especially if she's wearing one.
I'm telling you.
Wearing one.
What better way to
What better way
advertise
to
than
advertise?
to imbibe the products?
So just give us, we're going to, model in them and we will bring you sales.
I understand and I agree. When you say a couple, how many would be a couple?
About 15.
Like this.
A couple of 15 of them.
So at about 13 minutes to 10, as we conclude this conversation, let's open up the phone lines again so you can participate in the conversation. 0719 012 600. What's the best way for the youth to engage and take advantage? We keep talking about all these things, the demographic dividend, the youth bulge. What else? All these buzzwords.
Those are the main two.
Those very crucial buzzwords that we have. A large percentage of our population, the majority by 2/3, is the youth. And yet the youth are feeling like they're not involved, they're not engaged, they're not participating in the running of this country. This whole story of the youth are the leaders of tomorrow. Tomorrow, no. Tomorrow needs to happen today. We're also dealing with what very many people who are beyond the age of the youth have referred to as the microwave generation. They want everything now.
Instant
Coffee. Everything is now. So how do you engage then so that you can get what you want now?
It's not possible. And just being realistic about that.
Yeah.
But also, even when we look at success, a lot of times we normally, even the people that we emulate, we will show them at the end of their success, not the entire process of what it took for them to get to that success. And I think even now when we talk about wealth or stability, it's going to be a lot harder for young people to, for instance, own their own land, own their own house. These are things or conversations that we need to realistically have. A majority of us are not going to be able to afford that. And this is the new reality for a large population.
Never?
So what does... Yes.
The point she's making is an extremely valid one. Please continue.
Thank you. For once you've agreed with me. But
2 hours.
yeah, so that changes what a future looks like for a young person.
Yeah.
What success is for a young person. And I don't think that we are having those conversations. So not just to say, yes, they are microwave generation. Granted, they like things moving faster. But also what their goals that they would consider a success. It's going to be completely different for them. And they need to recognize that.
I think, in all things, we keep saying there has to be the resolve to keep trying. How far do you think this has gone in terms of the fight to push? Started halfway, roundabout throwing up the hands and giving up. Where are we?
A long way. We're a long way. The energy, it goes up and down.
Yes.
Especially when our country is so political. So also, it's sort of... it interferes. It interferes with progress. Because right now, for instance, we're going through a pandemic. We should be concerned about how county assemblies are utilizing their budgets geared toward health. Governors have their personal ICU beds in their homes. We should be angered by that. We should be calling for more action around that. But then we'll be completely confused with BBI tomorrow.
You say there are governors who have ICUs in their homes.
Yeah.
What if they meet with an accident? The fatal variety. This is assuming that it's COVID that's going to get you done and preparing. If that is actually true.
No, it is five governors.
That is short-sightedness in the extreme. It's like saying that you predict and you know how you're going to pass away. You can't, and you don't know. You don't even know when. One of the ways in which you make your problem everybody's problem, okay, is you make it everybody's problem. If you have, I've said this and I'm now repeating it. If you have parents who support what you do and how you think, because you've convinced them, when they have conversations with people of their ilk, they will be speaking almost with your voice, because they'll be saying, when it comes to youth, because when you are of a certain generation that is older, you have a way of looking at young people because you are influenced by your parents. And that doesn't change by me talking to people who are my age. But it can change because people who are my age support the views that I already have, because that's how they were also brought up. But if there is somebody of that generation who has been convinced that your way of looking at things is important, and they actually know it, when they have a conversation, they'll be having that conversation saying, no, actually, I think this one we are not entirely correct. This perhaps ought to be it. The same point I was making of broadening the base of those who see this perspective of the youth. It's important. It's not a fight that can be won by just the youth pushing the agenda. They can, but widen the scope of people who support that agenda.
It's also realized that, there's several groups who are working on the same thing around this country. And that's why I said then it might be difficult then to measure really where are we in this. Is the agitation that we've been involved in over the last, 10 years, 5 years, how are we able to measure it if we have groups, all over the place who are working on the same thing and we've not been able to come together? Because one thing from the conversation that we've had, one thing is very clear. If there is no coming together and working in tandem, then it would be so frustrating to see that all the work that has been done basically goes nowhere. It's a harsh reality, but it's a reality all the same. That it would be that, okay, there's this group here, there's this group here, there's this group here, fighting for this thing that then cannot be realized because we haven't come together. And you find that we're all doing the same thing in different places, as opposed to coming together where you will be able to go further. So, as you start to think and say, okay, so where do we go in all this? And I would definitely say that to organize and to rally around this cause is very, very important. Because truth be told, potential power is there. But then energy not utilized is useless. What are you going to do with it?
You know, something like this discussion on the bill, the Sakaja bill as we may call it. Yesterday we had a visitor, the deputy governor of Nyeri. Now, one of the things she did when she first got here, she's been here twice, she always brings us coffee from Dedan Kimathi University. And that's the first thing that she did. She gave us coffee. So even as we're having the conversation, we had coffee. It was sitting there, and we had the coffee. When you have an agenda that is as important to you, it must be as important as that coffee. This bill means a great deal. I would have preferred if we had even more time to discuss this bill than we actually have, because it's a sort of thing that changes. You see, it's a platform from which you can now do many things. I think the point I'm making has been made. Yes.
So the pushback even that ought to be louder, in terms of when things like these are happening, when we say that there are attempts at amending this particular bill. We saw the kind of pushback that we even got from Sakaja himself when he went to court and challenged the appointment into this authority, when somebody who is not youthful was appointed into the authority, contrary to what the provisions of that
Said
law
authority.
basically say.
Yeah.
Right? And is that direct pushback? Now, that kind of support that Sakaja would have needed is the kind of support that he didn't get.
We were part of that.
A few of you.
No, not a few of us.
How many?
There were other youth organizations.
How many?
Three. And actually our cases were joined. And if you follow that story, you will see that the AG had said he would appeal. And so we waited to be served and it didn't happen. But it's also to show you that it's not that young people were not behind him. We were. As a matter of fact, that idea came from KICC, where we had met with his team, Anthony Buluma, in the boardroom and suggested.
Yep.
Yes.
It's a good thing. It's a good thing that 3 youth organizations came and supported and even joined themselves in the suit.
Yes.
Okay? Now, the kind of support that I was referring to is a kind of bubbling support around the country. This is not an issue that just happens in Nairobi, like we're saying.
Right.
So things that happen in Nairobi that, they're completely...
Doesn't resonate.
They will not resonate.
Even within the entire Nairobi,
Yep.
I doubt if it resonates.
This is a conversation that ought to have resonated around. So, for example, how many youth are aware of this authority's existence? How many youth have engaged with the authority and what it seeks to have them engage in? You're supposed to basically getting all the information about the youth. It creates an entire database of youth from the moment they're leaving university or whatever institute of education, their qualification. This database is there. It's supposed to be ensuring that there's information about job opportunities and how they can access. How many youth know about this?
It's interesting that you say that,
Very
because
few.
we spoke to, I can't remember the Swahili word, Mtumishi.
Yes.
The other day on
Njeru
Sabasaba.
Kasangu.
And one of the things that he said, which stuck in my mind for a very long time, is that on that day when they were rallying support, they were in Nairobi. But they didn't have to think twice that they would be able to call and Kericho would answer, Bungoma would answer, Kisumu would answer. They knew, because they knew the support that they already had. And they knew that they were working from a point of resolve whereby the support that they had could not be questioned. And that stuck to me because this is something that it was reverberating through the nation at that point. So you can imagine if something as powerful as this, where somebody is being put in a position whereby she's 3-4 times the age of the people who should be running or for whose concerns this agency is in existence, you can imagine if through the entire nation, people were giving in their thoughts through media, through writing, through the public participation that you talk about, through barazas in the rural area, wherever it would be. If they understood this concept, you can imagine the impact that such a thing would have.
Indeed. Coming to the end of the show, thank you very much for joining us today, Nerima. We hope that you'll join us again as guest hosts. So we want to give you the opportunity to give a parting shot.
My parting shot would be that there are young people who are doing something about it, to even recognize them, to continue to have the energy to do that, but also the fact that the systemic challenges that young people face, young people also need to recognize that, and the limited information that's there. But more specifically, to the middle class or professionals who have this information or can access this information to engage with their peers, even in rural areas, that's lacking. And also I've taken from what Siti Muga has talked about in terms of that generational linkage and mentorship. And it's important to broaden our partnerships to groups that are not necessarily youth-focused and youth-centered. So for me, it's ending on a positive note. So there are people who are watching. We're watchdogs out there who are young, and we're working on organizing. So I'm going to be hopeful about change in this country.
Fantastic.
Great. And with that, Siti Muga, give us today's proverb.
Do a good deed and throw it into the sea. It's a Mozambican saying. Yes. If you participate in the sort of activities you're involved in, and the recompense you wait for is for recognition, that won't happen. You do it because it needs to be done, and you leave it at that. That's throwing it into the sea.
Nenda zako. Thank you very much for tuning in to the Situation Room today between 6 a.m. and 10 a.m. and to our audience on KTN Home that joined us between 7 and 9. See you again tomorrow, same time. Nduoko, Siti Muga, Eric Latif, and Nerima Wako. You are good morning. It's 10 o'clock.